It is 5:30, so I'm going to call the meeting of the Human Relations Ad Hoc Committee to order. And our first item on our agenda is roll call.
Blessum.
Here.
Here.
Dykeman. Here. Mathested.
Here.
Olson. Here. Schuler. Here. Staley. Here. Zablotny.
Here.
Zeltinger.
Here.
Okay, next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. The minutes have been in the agenda that we have all gotten. I will look for a motion on that.
I would move approval.
Alderwoman Olson moves approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Staley made a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Miranda.
on page 2, where Denise Dykeman's amendment begins, this is just a clerical. The word "the" is missing an E. That could be fixed for the minutes. That was the only thing I saw.
Okay. And is it a clerical thing like that, that can just be made even without an extra motion or fixed without an extra motion? Any other changes or anything?
Just to clarify, that's in the minutes, right? Not the draft ordinance.
Correct, in the minutes, page 2, the amendment made by Ms. Dykeman, first line, second word from the end of that first line.
Okay, any other changes or any suggestions? Okay, with that, I'll call the roll.
Olson.
Yes.
Schuler.
Yes.
Staley.
Yes.
Zablotny.
Yes.
Zeltinger.
Yes.
Blessum.
Yes.
Burlingame.
Yes.
Dykeman. Mathested.
Yes.
Next on the agenda is the discussion on the proposed additional amendments. We have all been presented by Mr. Blessum, a copy that is in our notes. And then Lyanne also just handed out another version with a few minor changes. So I guess I will start off with, Mike, do you have a motion to make?
Sure. So we'll start with what I have marked as Article ZZ1 or related to the budget. So I would move the language that I've brought.
Okay, Mike has made a motion to move that language. Is there a second?
Second.
Lyanne made the second. Discussion.
Okay, so if I could start, I guess, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
My main point here is that as an unelected body, this committee should not be making decisions related to taxpayer funds. That's really what I'm going for. I do have a couple other items in here related to the city manager as part of the annual report, giving information to the council on what the true cost of what is going on with the committee, and that would include, staff time, if it's having any impacts on keeping and recruiting staff, those types of items. And I think those are an important piece of it as well. But really the crux of this is that with as contentious as this has been, and with this being an unelected board, I would really like to see us avoiding using taxpayer funds as an appropriation. And just as a point of reference, from what I could find, and that on the back side of the sheet that I handed out, you can see the bottom piece there. Just as an example, the Bismarck version of the committee made a $250 donation to the Dakota Pro Musica group that was bringing in a speaker, or I believe a concert actually at Minot State. And again, maybe a wonderful thing for Minot State to put on. But what I'm getting at here is that using city funds and using public funds to do that, I don't think is appropriate. Again, as a point of reference, the city of Bismarck in their 2024 budget, at least at the time that this meeting was going on, which was in July, they had $3,500 in their budget. So again, we're not talking about a huge material dollar amount. It's more of a concept and more of something that I think we just want to put a line in the sand and at least have the council determine whether that's something that they want.
Could I have just a question for Mr. Blessum then? If public funding is your concern, then you also include about raising private funds in there. Could you clarify your reason for adding that into?
It's really the same idea. I believe that when this committee is formed, and because we're forming it as sort of an underlying government function, we're now entangling the city and what it's trying to accomplish with, in my view, what should actually be a private function in the first place. Nonprofits do this and do it well every single day. They raise funds, they bring in speakers, they bring in musical events, all of those types of things. The moment that we put that under the umbrella of the government, we run into a whole new world of entanglements. And so I'm not, to me, I would rather see us make sure we're avoiding the public funds portion of it, but I also believe the expenditure would show that the city is behind whatever that expenditure is. And that's a concern to me.
Miranda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the city manager. With regard to other appointed committees by the council and the mayor, are any of them currently given any kind of a budget?
None come to mind.
If I could follow up.
Yep, go ahead.
In the ordinances that govern those committees, do we have to have, or do we have in any of those specific wording about budget? And just to preface, I read the Bismarck ordinance real quick when you gave this to us. It doesn't also mention anything about budgeting. But are there any mentions of a budget on any committees that you're aware of within our ordinances?
Not that I'm aware of.
Denise?
Thank you. I had the same question, Miranda, so thank you for asking it. I am opposed to this amendment to the ordinance, and I will not be supporting it. I looked at the other cities here in North Dakota that have similar ordinances, and those are in your binders, Bismarck, Fargo, and Dickinson. None of them have a similar provision. And I would think that it is not helpful to hamstring our committee's ability to, say, receive grant money for studies or facilitated dialogue or trainings, for example, in the future. I think we should leave that the possibility open for this committee to take advantage of funding like that, perhaps. And also, I note that in your amendment, you say that we should be endeavoring at all times to minimize the fiscal impact, which I am all for. But then you've also assigned our city manager to spend a lot of time outlining costs and supplies and all this other stuff. So I really don't, I don't think this is a amendment that is necessary, and I will be opposing it.
Just to answer that specifically, while I do agree that really I've endeavored throughout the entire process to minimize the impacts on the city and to make sure that we're really not heading down a path that we can't support. At the same time, if this is going to be in law, I would really like it to be run well. And so in our last meeting, we talked about having the city manager involved. We talked about having the city attorney involved or someone from those offices. And I do think it's important, if this is in law and the committee is functioning, that we have that leadership and those perspectives at the table. I think that that's important. And yes, there will be costs to that. And I think that's a consequence of the path that we are choosing here.
Travis and then Miranda.
I'm in full support of this ultimately. And the bottom line, that anytime the government takes taxpayer dollars and decides they know better what to do with it by contributing it to other types of organizations outside of the function of the government is classic socialism. It's not the government's job to redistribute the taxpayers' wealth in ways that they themselves would not support. Leave it up to them. Keep it out of the hands of government.
Miranda?
2 points. First question is for Mr. Blessum. Is there a reason that you titled it Article ZZ1 instead of X11?
No, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't in the current flow and that it needs to be assigned where we think it goes. And I would leave that to the group to decide where it actually fits if we pass it.
Yep, go ahead, Miranda.
At the last meeting, I was very much in support of not assigning city staff to the committee for the fiscal impact. I do believe that we should restrict budgeting and that the committee itself shouldn't be spending any funds. But with that, I would like to make an amendment to the proposed ordinance change here. And ultimately, keeping the first sentence. So the amendment would be, the Human Relations Committee shall endeavor at all times to maximize the fiscal impact of its work on the city of Minot and its taxpayers, period. And then keeping the last sentence, the Human Relations Committee is not authorized to spend any funds from any source to carry out its work. Reason I do that is.
Can we get a second first?
Okay.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second? Oh, go ahead.
If I could just follow up, the reason I'm doing that is I am opposed to specifically one part in this, the private funds. My hope for this committee, if the council determines that they want to continue with it, would be that it would be used as an educational platform potentially. You know, we've used different circumstances and whatnot here in these discussions. And let's say, you know, Travis has talked about being a Ukrainian farmer. Let's say we have the group of Ukrainians come in to give their perspective on living in Minot. and Ms. Staley decides she wants to provide subs for that meeting. That could potentially be in violation of the use of private funds if she supplied food for that meeting. So I would like strictly to just remove those sentences and just keep it very simple, since this is going to be law.
Mike?
I'm not necessarily opposed to where Miranda's headed here. Can I clarify one thing, though? Miranda, I think you may have just said the opposite word when you talked. You said at all times to maximize. I believe you meant minimize.
Yep, I'm
Correct?
sure.
Okay, just to make sure. I want to make sure you had that as well, Stephanie. The only other thing, I'm not necessarily opposed to this, as I said. I think that gets the crux of what I'm looking for. The only thing that I would say is I would actually like to see us as all governments to do the things that I'm outlining, or having the city manager outline what that actually means. Because I think whether we like it or not, with what we've laid out, we will be expending city funds, even if it's simply the lights are on more than they would be if we weren't here in the evening, or whenever that meeting time is. There will be funds that are going to be spent. And I think as a habit, our governments should be in the transparency world and should be giving us as much of that information as possible. That's not meant to be odious. It's not meant to be something that city staff spend 3 weeks on, because that's counterproductive to what we're trying to do. But a simple statement in the annual report that says our estimated fiscal impact of operating the Human Relations Committee is $21,000. That's all I'm looking for in that, and that's why that sentence is there. Again, I'm not necessarily opposed to the amendment, because I think it keeps the crux of what I was looking for, but that is why that portion is there.
Stephanie?
So just a question to the motion maker and Mr. Blessum with the amendment. So the last sentence states, the Human Relations Committee is not authorized to spend any funds from any source to carry out its work. So it sounds as though we're still contemplating the city manager, city attorney, using the facilities here at the city. That's all going to be resources that are going to be coming from the city budget, paying the light bill, salaries to come here, investing staff time and doing the work of the committee. So arguably that would be spending funds from the city budget to carry out its work. Could you just clarify kind of what your intent is with that sentence, and if it could afford some amendment? I think by striking it, I think a lot of what is contemplated is maybe captured in that first sentence. So I would just pose that for the city and the amendment maker to consider too.
Sure. So I'll start with that. So I believe if you strike the last sentence, you're losing the core of what I'm looking for, though. So I'm open to additional amendment to fix what you're getting at. But the point here, if you go with the first one, I think it leaves it completely open for the council to still create a budget and to say, go ahead and spend what you need, because we're minimizing. $3,500 in a lot of people's minds would be minimizing the fiscal impact. And so I think losing the last sentence completely would give that up. And so I think, if there's a way to word it, my main thing was to get at new expenditures, right? It's truly spending $250 as Bismarck did on an event, or it's buying, tchotchkes and brochures and all these things to hand out at a booth somewhere. Those are the types of expenditures that I don't feel should be handled at the city. Using city resources, I think, is the default if we're going to have this committee at all. I think, using the facility, using the lights, using the time, that's why I would really love to see what the city manager has to say about what that adds up to.
Miranda?
I think we could easily fix it. And I would propose a change to my motion if the second would agree, and strike the word any and go with new funds, because you just stated that in what you were talking about. Use the word new funds.
Deanna,
Works
do you agree?
fine for me. Yep.
Okay, so the chair and the second, or the motion maker and the second agree, so now it's a friendly amendment. Did I see somebody's hand down here?
Yeah, I just had a question. So regarding what you said, Ms. Schuler, about education, what if we had a company that had interest in donating stuff, materials for education purposes? That has a cost to it. We won't pay for anything, but if they wanted to educate, say, our citizens about something that was brought up to someone, how does that fall into the play here? I'm talking like major companies or anybody.
Mike and then
Tchotchkes,
Miranda.
everything. It could be like at a booth, whatever.
I think the way that you've described that would not be caught by this. It would allow it. At the same time, my concern is still there. What we end up with is a city entity or a city committee that is using, and that's why I got at any funds from any source. They're using that to further an agenda. And so that's why I feel strongly that we want to be really careful around that line. Because the moment that private company is donating, let's say, a bunch of brochures as education pieces, again, now the city is headed down a path of providing something that can be one-sided.
But can I follow that up? Because on Article 2 authority, we did say that we are here to promote education, support diversity and quality of life for all residents. So if somebody or a group that was being represented under that scope wanted to donate for something, we're not following down that path. I think it would be nice to have that material to hand out to those people who want to learn about it. I don't agree with that. I won't be supporting that.
We have Miranda next, and then Denise, and we'll come back to you, Mike, if that's okay.
I just wanted to clarify with regards to potentially a group coming in and providing meal or whatever it is. The second sentence, the last sentence, I should say, it states that the Human Relations Committee, that would be whoever the people are appointed to this committee, would not be authorized to spend any new funds from any source to carry out its work. So if a benefactor chose to bring in food, that wouldn't be something that the Human Relations Committee essentially paid for or maybe even asked for. That would have been something that's offered by the community itself.
Denise?
I still maintain that this unnecessarily hamstrings the city from being able to devote resources, if that is what our elected officials have decided to do, and they have by reinvigorating this committee, they should be able to do that through this committee. And I would move to exclude this amendment from the ordinance.
Travis? And then Mike, I'm sorry.
I guess just to follow up with your comment, I don't think it hamstrings the city from taking action on what we advise them to take action on and spend money. So it isn't totally lost, but it does take it out of this body and gives it strictly to the city council to make that decision.
I don't think that's clear in this amendment.
Mike?
Yeah, I think it is clear in this amendment that this body would not have the ability to do that. Again, this isn't a theoretical. I'm laying out for you exactly what it was that Bismarck did and what I would like to try to have the future committee avoid, which is picking and choosing which initiatives and which things are worthy of public funds from unelected offices. I'm with you on the council making a good decision like that. If the council decided to bring a motion to spend some discretionary funds to bring in a speaker of that type, I think that makes perfect sense. And then they'll face the voters at the next election. This committee will not face the voters at the next election.
Can I ask a question, Mike? What was the backlash on both of these situations after this occurred from the public? Do you have any?
None at all. None at all that I know of. And again, but that's not to say that it was the right path. You know, I mean, put it this way, if you guys have watched any of the video, the Bismarck one, they meet in a conference room on the 4th floor, I assume in the city hall. To be honest with you, I believe their committee is more or less hidden from view. It's receded into the background in Bismarck. It's been operating since 2002. They go along, they got an extra $1,000 coming in 2024 that they didn't have this year. I think their budget for 23 was $2,500. And again, we're not talking about egregious numbers, but we are, as I've said throughout this entire process, talking about what the role of government actually is. And is that to advocate for certain points of view and to spend public dollars for certain points of view? My belief is that it is not.
Denise?
The way you contemplate this, would you contemplate the Human Relations Committee being able to propose a budget to the city council?
By the way that the ordinance would be written, if this language, either mine or Miranda's amendment, if either of those were taken, that would not happen in that way. But as part of an annual report or even during budgeting time, certainly I would expect the committee to say, hey, we would love to see the city do these things. We think the council should participate in these types of items. And if the council decided to budget it that way, but I don't want the discretionary spending coming from this committee, the council makes that decision. And I think that's as it would be today. If a different committee or commission today said, we would like to see X, Y, and Z in the budget, and it'll cost $15,000, the council can take that up anytime.
I don't have an issue with the city council, approving a proposed expenditure from this committee. But the way I read this, you're trying to limit this committee from, suggesting any expenditures at all.
Harold, do you have any thoughts on this?
Not really. I mean, it's a viable debate. You have differences of opinion here, and the committee's working through on what the right answer is to make a recommendation to the city council. Ultimately, the city council is responsible for all spending, even for committees that they've appointed. So, and it's at the council's discretion as far as, I mean, you could agree to put this restriction in there and the council could take it out. They could completely reject the recommendations from this committee and completely eliminate the ordinance completely. So what you're talking about tonight is what you as a committee are recommending to the council. So, yeah.
Mike?
So just to follow up on that, would it be would just as a matter of course, as part of the consent agenda, would there be bills paid that could include these expenditures and they would not be paid until that point? Is that how a city like Bismarck would do that today?
Can't speak for how.
Or maybe
I mean,
there's thresholds?
Bismarck abides by the same state laws that we do, so I would hope that they do it the same that we do, but I can't speak to how Bismarck or Fargo handles their budgeting policies and procurement and those kinds of things. But yeah, typically, the city council retains a lot of authority and oversight over all of the expenditures of the funds every city council meeting, and approving all of the expenditures every 2 weeks. So, in fact, I think that was one of the reasons why we went to 2 city council meetings a month versus just 1 a month, was to help expedite that financial processing, and because it was creating some challenges and issues and paying contractors and those kinds of things. But yeah, ultimately the council is responsible for all of that.
And so just one last follow-up on that. Has there been, in your time here in Minot, has a bill been rejected by the council for payment?
Not if the services were already rendered, but there has been projects that were along the way that could have represented future spending that the council has changed their mind on, either approving or disapproving. That changes on occasion. But once they've obligated the funds and have agreed as a quorum of the council that, yes, we're doing this, the funds associated with executing that have not been rejected.
And if I'm correct, Harold, the first step is the city approves the budget, which gives the city staff authority to spend the money, and then you come back to the city council to actually pay the bills based on the authority that was already granted, correct?
So a different question maybe for both council members or perhaps for Harold. Are there places today in Minot where where expenditures are made by people that are not city employees? I guess the point would be we're in a special case here where we've got appointed committee members. They are not elected or hired. They're not on payroll. Are there other instances where they're making decisions and obligating public funds?
I don't know that I'm aware of any. No one that would not be an elected official or a city employee or someone that's contracted with the city. I don't know of anyone that has any authority to spend city funds without one of those 3 connections.
And I would go to answer, sorry, Lisa, you can, but I would say that going back to what I just said, that nobody, I don't believe, has the authority to spend city dollars without the city council voting and approving that budget and approving that authority. So I think this would remain consistent with that, this council wouldn't be able to make, or this committee would not be able to make decisions based on budget without first going to council, correct?
One caveat to that is, the city finance director and myself, we have an internal approval process for all expenditures of the city. And there we do question a lot of expenditures and reject a lot of expenditures through that process as city staff. But we do that in conjunction with the authorities that the council has given us and what they've approved, and keeping things in line with the budget that the council has already approved and within the policies that the council has approved.
Lisa, did you have something to add?
And I was going to just mention that the library board, it's a little different animal than some of the other appointed committees, but that is an appointed board, and that board does have the authority to spend dollars, and some of those are taxpayer dollars.
Based on their budget, right? So that would have been a budget approved by the council?
It's based on their budget and the authority given to them by state law. That's what gives them the exception is state law.
Any other discussion? Denise?
Yeah, so based on this, it sounds like this is really a non-issue, and I again would move to exclude this amendment from the ordinance.
So a point of order, I don't think the motion's in order right now. We've got an amendment that's on the table, correct? So just to give my final thought on the amendment, I'll be no on it, not because I don't agree that that would still work. I believe that my full text is still our best path forward, but so I will be a no on the amendment.
Okay, Lisa? And, Stephanie, do you have a point of order first?
Just a quick point of order. I don't know if I'm connected to the dais right now. I'm not here. I'm seeing it displayed. So I'm going to show what I believe is the amendment on the floor. If everyone could just, especially the motion maker, Ms. Schuler, if you could review and just confirm that that's, as everyone understands, the present motion before the body.
That looks good.
Lisa?
Thank you. I'm going to vote no against this. I would be more in favor of what Ms. Dykeman is recommending because I think it's unnecessary. I think that the budgeting process belongs to the city council, and I don't think that this wording is necessary in the ordinance.
Okay. Seeing no further debate, call the roll, please.
Okay, just so for the public and the committee, we are voting to amend the original motion. So Schuler,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Zablotny,
Yes.
Zeltinger.
Yes.
Excuse me. Blessum,
No.
Game,
Yes.
Dykeman,
No.
Mathested,
Yes.
Olson.
No.
Motion passes to amend. Now we're on to the original motion
Now we
with
move on.
amendment.
On to the original motion with the amendment, which is essentially voting for what we just voted for, correct? Now that it's amended. Yep, as it's on the screen. Mike?
So to clarify, Councilwoman Olson, is it your contention that that none of the language is necessary because the council will need to make its decisions anyway? If we put it in ordinance, the council will not be allowed to appropriate. That's my take on what what I'm trying to accomplish anyway, is that the council doesn't have the authority to do that under law through the ordinance.
Committee member Blessum, I would disagree with that. So the council has the authority to set a budget for whatever committee that it wants. And the language in this actual amendment too does just refer to the Human Relations Committee. It doesn't mention anything about the city council not being able to appropriate funds here as well. And then just as a reminder for the committee too, like whatever is passed here is also going to be referred to the city council for its consideration as well. So the council would then have to review this and then agree they're going to limit their own authority to fund its budget. And I mean, as we all know, they're all elected, so that could change over at the next election and they could amend that ordinance back as well too. So something to consider. If I may continue, I do have one question and a point of clarification for what new funds are contemplated as being underneath this amendment. So it states under the second sentence, the Human Relations Committee is not authorized to spend new funds from any source to carry out its work. What funds is that contemplating?
The word new just basically helps to differentiate. As Mr. Blessum had stated, there would be essentially city funds being used to pay the payroll for the staff that we've got tied to this committee, the lights for the building to be open and available, those types of things. So anything above and beyond those expenses that we've already put into the ordinance.
Mike?
Okay, so to clarify what the city attorney was just talking about then, is it your contention then that regardless of what we put in this portion of the ordinance, if we did and the city council took it as is, making that assumption, that really nothing we've done stops the city from putting it in the budget and appropriating the funds and delivering the funds to the committee for their use? We've tried to say they're not authorized to spend it, but the council can just override that anyway, if it's in law?
So the way that I picture this working, if the amendment were to pass as is that the Human Relations Committee will try to minimize the fiscal impact. It doesn't say it shall have no fiscal impact at all on the city budget. It just says that it'll attempt to minimize it. So that's open to interpretation. And then the second sentence, the Human Relations Committee is not authorized to spend the new funds from any source to carry out its work. It doesn't prohibit the city council from authorizing funds from a source to carry out the work of the Human Relations Committee. So per se, if the Human Relations Committee wanted to make a recommendation to the city council for an event or something to fund, that could be brought to the city council for its consideration, and they could perhaps authorize the allocation of those funds. And I think that would be in line with this ordinance, and it wouldn't be in violation.
Thank you, Stephanie. Mike?
Okay, so, so I think that scenario makes sense. The one that I'm still questioning is, could the city council simply choose to budget the dollars and appropriate the dollars and give it to the committee and say, go ahead and spend it on whatever you like? You've got $5,000 for the next year. Would this ordinance, with this being part of the ordinance, would that prohibit the spend?
I think it would definitely be at odds
Right.
with the authorization.
And if I could continue, so I think what we're saying then is that, yeah, the council's going to do what it's going to do. If they choose to appropriate funds, they get a recommendation from the committee, and they decide to spend $250 on an event at Minot State because the council believes that it's the right thing to do. I think that that's an acceptable path for those funds to get done. I wouldn't agree with them. I would come and talk about not doing it. But I think elected officials are making decisions about public funds, which is exactly how that should occur. What I don't want is an unelected committee obligating funds from the city.
We got Miranda and then Denise.
Just one other point of clarification or piece of information, actually. I know you're trying to stop funds from being diverted from taxpayer into this committee, and I agree with that. But there is always an avenue for the council to change any ordinance through 2 readings. So first of all, we're just making a recommendation to the council. They may take this document and take that out when they see this in December, and it's a moot point. But in addition to that, 2 years from now, it could come up as a change to this ordinance and go through its 2 readings and be changed at that point too. It could also be changed to be more stringent at that point. What we're presenting is what we're suggesting the council accept. Whether they choose to do it or not is entirely up to them.
Denise?
I still think this is not helpful and just muddles the issue, and, you know, it would be cleaner without this in there at all.
Travis?
My questions were answered.
Okay. Diane?
I like what Mike is saying, because it's a fine line setting a standard where unelected officials can come in and spend money, my tax dollar, which I object to a lot of things that the tax dollar is spent on, and I don't get a word. But this clarifies, and yes, the council can come in and change anything, but if we set that as the base, and that's our goal, then maybe they will look at it more closely rather than us just saying, oh yeah, you can do, you know, if we don't put anything in there, we're giving them the assumption that they can spend money. And I think unelected officials, that's where the difference is. We can spend taxpayer money, but it should be done by the council members if they want to appropriate, and they may not. Once we, you know, they may say no taxpayer money. So I would like to see this in there just as a baseline.
Travis?
So I guess just a clarification, Harold had made the statement that he's not aware of any other non-elected body other than the library board through state law that has the ability to allocate or spend funds if you're not an employee or not an elected position. Would it be, I guess, Lisa, your contention then that this body would always be the same, that the city council would not give funds for discretionary spending, that it would not already have a directive to it if they were given, or they would make that decision on their own?
So if I may respond, it would be my contention that this is unnecessary verbiage, because I think that we would follow the process that is typically followed, which still does allow the city council the authority to appropriate funds if the city council believes it is necessary and appropriate. I just don't feel that this amendment is necessary in the ordinance.
And if I could,
Travis.
just one final comment. I have to disagree with that, because I think the more that we can spell out, the clearer it is, and that the intentions are understood, and that we don't go down a path of assuming that that's the case, and rather than having it spelled out. So I see no harm whatsoever in that.
Let's go to Mike and then Denise.
So I think that from the couple examples that we do have, I think somebody said Bismarck does not have this in their ordinance. And Bismarck today has a budget that they spend on their own without the approval of the city council. So I think the default without having it is that path is the path that we will head down. I think we've got members of the committee already that have said, if we need educational materials, we should go do that. And so I think the default position of the people that will be appointed will be that they will want a budget and that they will want to appropriate those funds to the things that they think are the right path. And so I think we do want to spell out, at least give the city council the language to work with if they choose to go that path.
Denise?
I'm seeing you trying to do is have an unelected body put limits on elected officials and what they are going to do. And I can't support that.
Okay. Mike?
I think we just had a discussion a couple minutes ago. Miranda said it very, very well, that we don't have any authority. The only thing we're able to do is hand them a document that says, here's our best shot at it. That's it.
But what you're
They're
trying
gonna-
to do is limit their ability to spend money.
The city council has no problem spending money. Don't. The city council will find a way if that's where they believe that the fund should go. And so I don't think making sure that an unelected body has taxpayer funds to use as they see fit in any way is in the spirit of what our government should be and what it was founded to be.
Diane?
So what you're saying, Mike, is this unelected body can go to the council, even with this in there, and ask for funds. But with this in there, they can't just decide they're going to have a pizza and beer party and celebrate or whatever they want to do to bring people in, but they have to go before the city council and request funds. Is that correct?
The way that I see it, based on the city attorney's explanation, is that is still on the table then. So using the exact example we have, if Minot State is bringing in a performance related to something that members of the committee would feel very strongly about, they could bring something to the city council that says, we believe it's in the best interest of the city to provide funds to Minot State to help in bringing this in and making it happen. That absolutely works with the language that we've got. But what it doesn't say is that the city council can't give them an open checkbook at the beginning of the year, as small as the dollars might be, to pick and choose the way that they would choose to spend those funds.
All right, any further discussion? All right, so the amendment that we will be voting on now is the one that is currently on our screens. Please call the roll.
Blessum?
Yes.
Burlingame?
No.
Dykman?
No.
Mathested?
No.
Olson?
No.
Schuler?
Yes.
Bailey?
No.
Zablotny?
Yes.
Ziltinger?
Yes.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. Okay. Next on the agenda is next agenda. Mike, you want to?
Yep, so I'll continue. So this is the next article that I'm proposing tonight. This one is a prohibition on public statements. Again, the numbering would go wherever we decide that it fits. Again, this one comes from a real world example of what happened in Fargo with their Human Rights Commission. And you can see on the back side of your sheet what that statement was. If you remember, during the legislative session, there was a lot of turmoil and a lot of uproar around certain bills that were passed in a lot of different ways. The Fargo Human Rights Commission decided that they wanted to make statements related to those bills, number one. And number two, they put out a statement of support for Dr. Gandhi and the Fargo School Board, stating that the district will prioritize keeping students safe over obeying a new North Dakota state law.
Hold on, Mike. Can we get a second first?
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry.
It was my fault. I missed it too. Can we get a second?
Second.
Okay, Travis, second. Sorry about that.
No problem. So in essence, the Fargo Human Rights Commission, again, unelected body, put out a statement that essentially became the position paper of the city of Fargo, supporting the superintendent and the school board in Fargo disobeying state law. And I don't believe that that is what we want this committee to do, regardless of what its members may think is the right path and the right thing to do. It doesn't stop them from sending a letter or other communication to the city council urging the council to take that up, but this body should not put out statements of its own. One other quick point, because I know this came up the first time that I brought this up. In no way does this preclude a committee member from making statements. Even saying, I am a member of the committee and this is my position, but it stops them from obligating the city itself and the committee and the city council from whatever statements could be developed.
Okay, further discussion? Miranda?
So you just stated that your proposed amendment in no way stops members from making statements, correct? But within this, it states, its members are prohibited from making official public statements or resolutions on any subject as members of the committee or representing the city. There's some loosely defined or maybe potentially loosely interpreted wording there. And I think back on when this committee was actually put together, Scott, I believe, as the chair, was asked to join a podcast and talk about his service. And the only other person on the committee here that did that was you. You went on specifically talking about this committee. That could have been construed as official public statements, resolutions, as a member of this committee. So I really feel like I can't support this. I feel like it's in violation of a First Amendment right and people's freedom of speech. With regards to official public statements, what you've provided to us from Fargo, I don't know where that came from. It doesn't show in context. I'm not sure where to find it. I don't know if it was supported by the Fargo City Council or the mayor. It was just something that was given to us. I can't support this because I believe this specific amendment would be in violation of our First Amendment rights.
Mike?
I guess I would disagree. I don't believe that to be the case at all. And I would be open to adjusting the language to make that clear. I think what I just said, I think any member of the committee itself, as Scott and I both did, going on a podcast, absolutely should be able to do that. That is the First Amendment right. But when you're making a statement as a committee, in this particular case, the Fargo group, at their July 17th meeting, and I would suggest all of you go and take a look at it. They also post these on their website. So these statements are out there. They make statements. They make public statements. They must, I assume, have the authority from their city council to do so. And what I'm asking our council, at the very least, and put it this way, I realize that the budget one went down. This one may go down as well. We may decide not to include it in our draft. But I think it's important that the council understand that these are questions that are there, and by not addressing them, they are de facto giving the opposite response. They are saying, we expect you as a committee to put out responses from time to time. We expect you to put out statements that become the city's position. I believe that that's what this did from the Fargo Human Rights Commission. And this one was voted on, it was approved, it was published. And so whether we like it or we don't, it's happening, and I believe that our council should have the opportunity to at least address it when they bring up the ordinance.
Travis and then Denise.
So I'm not sure how it can be any clearer, and I will read what it says in the second sentence. It starts, as such, the Human Relations Committee and its members are prohibited from making official public statements or resolutions on any subject as members of the committee or representing the city. So it doesn't say it precludes or excludes personal statements. It says you're not to make an official statement as a member of this body on behalf of the city or this body. It's very clear.
Denise?
Again, I believe this is an unnecessary amendment. Dickinson, Fargo, Bismarck, they don't have this kinds of article in their ordinances. I'm not aware of any other committee that has this prohibition. And I would assume that, if the council authorized the committee to draft a statement, it would be done in conjunction with council. I don't foresee members of the committee going and making official public statements. I don't know that you could even do that. I would say this is another unnecessary amendment. And I will not be supporting it.
Mike?
Yeah, I think again, we are, by not including it, if we went that path, we are telling them to do exactly that. The reason that those are not in those other ones, what you get from those is you get statements from those bodies. That's what occurs today. The Fargo statements are there. I mean, if that's a very easy thing. If we want to bring their website up, we can find their statements that they make regularly. And so again, this maybe brings a point of order a little bit around what the process is going to be when we get to the council. And if you guys want me to bring this up later, we can certainly do it then. But I'd like to understand a little bit how the draft will be presented and what other information will be given to the council beyond what is in the draft itself.
This is my anticipation. We haven't discussed it necessarily, but my anticipation is that the draft that is approved tonight will be forwarded to the city council. The city council has access to the minutes from all the meetings. They can watch all of the videos from all of the meetings. So they will have as much access as they choose to have. But the one item that they will be taking action on is the ordinance.
Other discussion?
Yeah.
So as it's stated, I will not be able to support it because I do have some consternation with the words "and its members," because I do feel that when you look at it on paper, it really comes across as no one has the right to share their opinion or to share their thoughts on anything that would come before this committee. I could probably live with it if we struck "and its members" so that it's not the Human Relations Committee making an official statement, but I can't support it with those 3 words in there.
So Scott, I would bring an amendment. I can work with that. So Stephanie, what I'm thinking is to remove "and its members." So this is a motion to remove "and its members." And then following up after the word "subject," also removing "as members of the committee or" would be removed.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Now, let's have discussion on this part. Everybody take a chance to look at it there in front of you and discussion.
Just a grammatical. After the first striking "and its members," because we're referring to a committee, that word should be "is" instead of "are."
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, other discussion? My question on this would be, throughout the entire thing, we continuously talk about how our role is only advisory. So going back to the idea of, are we advisory? What if, could this committee under this, Mike, as you brought this forward, make a recommendation to the city council on a public statement? Would that be consistent with this or inconsistent?
You bet. I think that's exactly how that should occur. What I would love to see is the committee, if it is spun up and running, that if they believe that it is important that the city make an important statement on something, that they draft the language, that they send it, whether it's in letter form or whatever that is, back to the council to approve.
Other thoughts, questions, comments? Travis, and then
If I could, and just reiterate, what it does is it takes it back to folks that make the decision are accountable to the voters. And that's where it should reside. It should reside with those that have been elected, not those of us that have been appointed.
Christine?
So my only other question is going back with what Ms. Schuler said about going on podcasts or personal opinions. That's just fine?
Yeah, and in my mind always has been, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because when I first started this committee, I wasn't aware we were even able to talk about this. And so when I did see you on the podcast the first time, I was actually surprised and I was shocked. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then I saw Scott and I was like, oh, okay. I mean, that's just how I feel, but I didn't feel comfortable talking about anything because I wasn't sure what I can talk about. So I just want to make sure that people understand that they feel comfortable speaking and knowing what they can do. So I do like that there's a protocol for this. I understand where you're coming from and just addressing it so it can be a official statement versus like us or whoever the committee is going to be in the future saying that. Okay, I just want to know the difference. Thank you.
Well, and I think you just brought up a very good point. you know, we have opposing views on, I'm sure, many subjects in regards to what this committee will deal with, and it would be unfair for any member to make a comment that obligated every other member, even though they didn't agree. And I don't care which side of whatever situation you're on, that should not happen. We all have our own opinions, and at the end of the day, anything that we forward or we agree to has to be by a vote of the group that moves up the chain.
Denise, I think your hand went up a little bit sooner.
Yeah, I don't have a huge issue with sort of the spirit of this. I, again, don't believe that it's necessary because this is an advisory body and thus our, anything that we do would be advisory and would need to be approved by the council, right? But I do share your concern. I did speak to a board member on the Bismarck committee, and they have sort of a gentle person's agreement that they aren't going to go publicly and undermine the work of the committee or other council members on podcasts and things like that, but would rather speak with a unified voice. Now, I don't know that we need to put that, in as part of our ordinance here, but I do think it is a good idea to sort of have a civil agreement among ourselves that we're not going to go undermining each other.
Miranda?
So just going back to, I just went through the Fargo, it's a Human Rights Commission there versus what we're looking at as a Human Relations, but reading through their ordinance, their commission is set up as an advisory in nature as well. So it states specifically, final authority shall be the board of the city commissioners of Fargo. We don't know this, the statements that were provided, if those were approved by the Board of Commissioners in Fargo to be published, if that was the case. When we read what we have put together for the authority within this Human Relations Committee, we aren't giving this committee any authority to make statements as it is now. All final authority and actionable items still remains with the City Council. Even in its amended form, I still think we're already covering this within Article 2 of what we've put together.
Mike?
So I apologize. I wish that I would have followed that all the way through. Here's what I can say about what I watched and heard from the Fargo group. They made no reference to, this will be on the next city council agenda, or it will be approved at the next one, or I'm going to hand this to this council member to do so. There was none of that discussion. At the end of it, it left you at least watching that it was a done deal and published. And so that's just context. Second of all, I agree that that's what we've kind of used as a guiding principle for all of us, I think. I think we've done a pretty good job of that, of saying this is advisory in nature. The one thing that I would say, leaving this open, I think invites that, and it may test it sooner rather than later. And using the same argument from before, I believe that this is one that is in our best interest to leave in for the council to strike if they believe that concept. And I think it's a better position to start from to say, because it's advisory, this is a very important part of that advisory idea. Let the council strike this if they believe that it's already covered and it's going to be fine.
I want to say one of the nuance that is going to happen with this too is, so let's say that and it's not this group, we keep using that, but it means the group that we're working on, because this is an ad hoc group and it will not be the same committee. And I just want to remind the people in the audience that may not know that is what we're talking about. But the Human Relations Committee could say, we make a recommendation to support Ukrainian Heritage Day. Ukrainians are getting picked on a lot in this committee. It seems like Travis volunteered to use Ukrainian, so therefore that's who gets picked on. That once we make that endorsement, that we make a recommendation to City Council, that sort of becomes a public statement in amongst itself. And there's nothing that can be said about what audience members or the public can do with that statement. Now, there may not be a large anti-Ukrainian community out there, but there is amongst other communities that we may be talking about. So within that nuance of it is the intention behind it, I agree with, which is the entire purpose of this committee is to make recommendations to City Council. But by the nature of even making a recommendation to City Council, that in itself is a somewhat public statement. If you follow what I'm saying there. So that's just kind of where I worry about. Oftentimes when these type of rules come into play, they're used as a tool to repress public comment. And I am a kind of a First Amendment purist where I don't like the idea of anything to repress public comment and to repress First Amendment rights. So I'll probably be voting against this, although I absolutely prefer to stick to the original intention of this committee, which is to make recommendations to city council. So. Thought Christine was raising
Oh,
her
no, I
hand.
was, sorry.
Just stretching, it's okay. All right, any other discussion? All right, call the roll.
So right now you'll be voting on the amendment. Blessum,
So to be clear, the amendment is what's marked in red, correct?
correct. It would be to amend the original motion to remove and its members, strike or, put is, and then remove as its members of the committee or.
So yes.
Burlingame,
No.
Dykeman,
No.
Mathested,
No.
Olson,
Yes.
Schuler,
No.
Bailey,
No.
Zablotny,
Yes.
Zeltinger.
Yes.
The motion to amend fails. So now we're back to the original motion.
Okay. Any further discussion on the original motion? All right, hearing none, please call the roll.
Blessum,
Yes.
Burlingame,
No.
Dykeman,
No.
Mathested,
No.
Olson,
No.
Schuler,
No.
Bailey,
No.
Zablotny,
Yes.
Zeltinger.
Yes.
Motion fails.
All right,
I'd like to make another motion.
Yeah,
in
go ahead,
regards
Travis.
to, so if you could put up on the screen Article 2. I'd like to move that we strike some language in Article 2. Sorry, I didn't bring something for you to see, but and in the current version, out the
Do you want the
Okay,
amended draft
it's
or
there.
as
Okay,
it
gotcha.
presently?
So what I'd like to do is move that we strike education, comma, support diversity and, so that the sentence will read, Minot Human Relations Committee is an advisory committee established by the authority of the Minot City Council to promote quality of life for all residents.
okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second, discussion.
Reason, once again, we've done a fantastic job of not increasing division and discrimination in this group by starting to pinpoint different concepts and ideas. It's really, really straightforward. Idea is simply that we're here to promote quality life for all, not certain factors or sections or do things that may favor something that isn't entire. Okay? All is the entirety. Supporting diversity is not entirety, it's discrimination. And I'd like to see us strike discrimination from this ordinance.
Okay, further discussion? Miranda?
Is there a reason you're removing the word education? So if we're wanting to promote quality for all life, or for residents, all residents, you want to remove potential for the city as a whole to be educated on how that can happen for all residents?
I believe that it's inherent in supporting the quality of life that was going to be done in multiple ways. One facet might be education, but it will be certainly considering needs of the community to support all people, the quality of life. It's to support quality of life, if that includes education, so that can, I mean, it's not excluded at this point. But it also doesn't focus specifically on one sort of an action to accomplish that.
Further discussion? All right, hearing none, please call the roll.
Zablotny,
Yes.
Zeltinger,
Yes.
Blessum,
Yes.
Burlingame,
No.
Dykeman,
No.
Mathested,
No.
Olson,
Yes.
Schuler,
No.
Staley?
No.
Motion fails.
Okay, and we also had some amendments that were handed out by Lyanne beforehand. If you would like to make a motion on those. I almost forgot about you, so I apologize.
I thought we were gonna do them after the public.
You want to do them after?
I think so, because
Okay.
I think we should hear from the public before, if that's okay.
Yeah, so with
They're
that.
sitting here waiting, I'm sure they would.
I know everybody in the audience. First off, welcome everybody that's here. We will begin our public comment now. You just got done hearing me say that I'm a First Amendment purist, and I am. That being said, I'm not a First Amendment I am anti-filibuster. So we are going to ask that if you come up to please address the bill that we're talking, or the ordinance, I'm sorry, that we're talking about as much as possible. I'd also encourage you to, I will ask that you just keep it to 5 minutes or less, and I will be keeping track of that. And I was also talking about how, sitting through many legislative hearings in my day that I've saw chairmans before say things like, don't tell us the same thing the last 5 people have told you. And I saw that people actually gavel people out. I won't be doing that. Don't worry. I'm going to give everybody their 5 minutes. I'm a First Amendment purist, I think. But that being said, please respect everybody's time as much as possible. So with that, when you do come up, if you just want to say your name, please, clearly, and then maybe where you're from, and we'll go from there. So the microphone is on on whoever's first.
And just as a point of order, we're going to hold open item number 3 with the additional amendments, and we're going to circle back with Ms. Zeltinger's draft, right? Following the public hearing. Okay.
Yep.
Another point of order, Scott.
Yeah.
Is there something specific with the written piece of testimony? Is that informational for us, or is it something you'll?
We're going to talk about that next. After the public part is done, we'll kind of just review what came in. So.
Hello, Human Relations Committee. Thank you so much for the work that you've put in over the last several months. I was out of state for a family emergency, was not able to attend many of the hearings. I did watch many of the, not all of them, but many of the televised meetings, and I know that you went through a lot of work together as a committee. And so I did download the redlined and the clean version. I appreciate that you had both those documents available. I'm sorry. I can't remember. Did I say my name?
You did not.
My name is Wendy Bagley. I'm a resident here of Minot for the last several years, fairly active in our community, leading multiple groups. I came out very strongly in the spring against the formation of this committee for many reasons, and so I will not repeat those reasons. What I would like to do is focus on what I read in both the redlined version and also in the amendments that were proposed earlier. Again, number one, I did want to say thank you for providing both the clean version and the redlined version. That made it very easy to read and understand kind of the thought processes going along. So let me say from the outset that if the city council were to choose to adopt this ordinance, I would actually approve of it if it had Mike Blessum's amendments to it. I believe that what he proposed made the case for me to say, okay, that is something I could get behind. The fact that this body chose to vote down these 2 amendments actually makes me very sad, because the whole purpose of this Human Relations Committee is to be an advisory committee. It's not, my thought from the very beginning is that it was trying to be a solution looking for the problem. There was no specific problem. People did not bring anything beyond of, oh, I feel unsafe in this committee, or in this city, I'm sorry. There were not specific issues. In fact, even when Pride Day came, or Pride Month came, there were not, huge hate signs or things going on to protest members of our community who wanted to act that way. I was part of a group that decided to make that decision. If they want to choose to celebrate that way, that's fine. That's good. I believe that is their right. I did not want to get involved in that and say, I take away your right to think that. So in my opinion, our city is really good at trying to let people have their opportunities to rise up and speak. Now, that being said, once it starts becoming a government function, when government steps in any level, whether it's an advisory committee or the city council committee, to say we want to put up this side of the community versus another side, I think there's a danger line there. I like how the ad hoc or the amendments that Mike Blessum put here that would have very much curtailed the budget and very much curtailed official statements and put it on the backs of the city council, that is appropriate. There's not really anything else in the way that the redlined version or the clean version, nothing else that really stood out to me that I did not like. However, by not passing those two amendments today, kind of showed me two things. Number one, it showed me that there are several of you who would like the Human Relations Committee to take a very much more active role, more than just an advisory position. And you hope that it goes that way in the future. Secondly, over and over, I heard you guys say, well, the city council could choose to do whatever it wants. Then why in the world are you here in the first place? You know what? My thought is this has been a waste of time. Members of the community can come to the city council to share their personal experiences and let the city council choose. Unfortunately, city council members, you chose to kick the can down the road over and over and over again, and then chose to kick it to a committee. To me, that has been a waste of time and a waste of city resources. And there will be an election coming up in a few months, and it will be our community that will decide which way to go. Those are my sincere feelings. If this chooses to go forward, I would love to see Blessum's amendments go forward. Thank you very much.
Your time. Next.
Thank you. I'm Deb Hoffarth. I'm a resident of the city of Minot. I don't have a lot to add. I wanted to thank the work of the committee. I think you all worked very hard. I watched some live online, some later online. I think everybody worked really hard. I look forward to the city under this committee being a more welcoming community and a community that values diversity. I think that's really important. And I think this committee has done that work to do that, and I appreciate that. And as far as the amendments that you just were discussing, I really appreciate the fact that you didn't hamstring the committee either budgetarily through the council or by limiting anybody's free speech. So thank you very much. I appreciate your hard work.
Thank you. Next.
Hello. My name is Christina Wolf, and I live just a tiny bit south of Minot, but I do all my business in here and everything I do. Sorry, I'm not close?
There you go. That's way
Okay.
better.
Didn't hear any of that?
Maybe say it again. It was a little bit hard.
My name's Christina Wolf, and I live just about that far south of Minot. I'm in here every day. This is where I do all my business and everything. I do appreciate, I read the new draft, and I appreciate the fact that it was made more useful for all the people in Minot and not just certain groups, which seemed very discriminatory when you guys started, or when this whole thing started. I wonder if I can get a definition of what you guys consider to be civic and human rights.
So we can discuss that when we're done, but right now this is your time, okay?
Okay. Anyway, I'm curious what that would be, because I assume that most of us probably have different ideas of what that means. So I don't know what you guys want to put forward as a group, what that means. So far, no one has been able to tell us why this ordinance was brought back into the forefront in the first place. And I still, like I testified when this all came to go in the beginning, that I believe that it's just a waste of time and resources. There are other organizations that take care of these kind of issues, like the police department, North Dakota Department of Labor. They have the North Dakota Human Rights Act, City Council. So I just think that this is just another thing that's kind of over the top and a waste of our time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Greg Demme. I live just outside the Minot city limits. I pastor Grace Baptist Church in Minot, and I am the chair of the District 3 Republican Party, which is one of the Minot districts. I have two comments. One of them piggybacks on something that was said earlier, and I'm incredibly disappointed to hear so many comments from the discussion today say, oh, this is unnecessary. This amendment, this is unnecessary. This is unnecessary. The entire basis of the United States Constitution has been to limit the power of the government. The purpose of those amendments was to attempt to limit the power of the city council, yes, in an advisory capacity, but the purpose, as was so ably stated earlier, is that, yes, the city council can do whatever it wants to do, but the purpose of this committee is to advise the city council on what to do. And if you start with something that limits the city council's power, you are in the spirit of the United States Constitution, because people take power and run with it. We were already given plenty of examples about how that's already happening with similar committees right here in this state. So to just off the cuff say that such things are unnecessary tells me that you have no understanding about, one, who people are when they have power, and two, no understanding of what the United States Constitution provides for us. My second comment is, I'm forgetting my second comment, so thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
My name is Barb Solberg. I have been a resident of Minot almost my entire life, and I'm very proud to say that I think we have many accepting communities inside of our own community. And I think about the fact that our public schools accept all students. Our local ER hospital, where my son is an emergency room physician, accept all patients. Our local businesses in town accept all traffic that comes into them. Our city itself has welcoming signs on the outside of every entrance that says, "Welcome to Minot." We welcome the Minot Air Force Base, saying only the best come north. I'm excited that when I drive down University Avenue, I see banners that say, "Be seen, be heard." And so I think it's important, the work that this committee has done. And I thank you. And I know the devil is always in the details. And I've served on many committees like this where you have to dig in deep and find words and phrases that could come into question. And being a writer and an English teacher, I know how important those things are. So thank you for doing the devil in the details. I also think it's really important for the city of Minot itself to take a stand on human relations. Our North Dakota University system has many universities and colleges that offer degrees in human relations. Undergraduate degrees, master's degrees. We find it important enough that we have a boundary where we limit how much we will allow to happen to somebody else. And even our Declaration of Independence says, all people have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I applaud you. I thank you. I'm glad that you are moving forward and giving this to the City Council, and I do not believe you have wasted your time. Whenever we talk about human rights, we are talking about probably the most important thing that we have on this earth, and that's our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, my name is Claire Gray. Resident of Minot. Lived in this area most of my life. The last time I spoke in front of City Council, I told everybody that I did not feel safe in this community. Still rings true. And some people ask why I don't feel safe in this community. The biggest story that comes to my mind is when I was a teenager growing up here. I had a friend that came to my group, bruised, beaten. Nobody would help him. The reason why he was bruised and beaten is because somebody beat him because he was gay. Nobody did anything about it. These people that beat him said that they were just keeping the riffraff out. They were making sure everything was safe. Apparently it wasn't safe for him. He ended up leaving this community and going off and being productive, being a good person. Move forward, I went to a lecture in Australia Theater. Heard almost the exact same thing. This isn't isolated. This isn't something that we can just not look at and say that it's just too divisive. It divides us too much, so we can't look at it. We have to look at it. We have to see the differences in us so we can grow as a community, so we can grow as people, so we can find the kindness for each other. A quote that I heard a couple weeks ago, we are killing ourselves with the same old, same old. If we don't go forward and change as a community together, which this committee is an opportunity to do that, to find common ground, to find the differences in each other, so we can understand each other. I thought this was a great opportunity when I first heard about this committee. So excited about it. As we gone through it, I lost my excitement. Now we're close to the end when it's going to be ratified. Am I going to have the same excitement? Who knows? Are those kids going to be kept safe? Probably not. If we don't talk about it as this opportunity affords us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, I'm Sherry Armbrust, and I moved here in 1997, and I've probably suffered more indiscrimination than any person in this room. But as a human, we don't blame other people for the bad things that have happen in our life. I don't think that empowers us. I don't think that helps anyone else. I think when we go through hardship, we try to figure out, how can I overcome this? And by reaching out, you find all kinds of people around you to help you, but you've got to share. And you've got to help other people understand what you're going through. You can't blame. And this has been my life. When I came here, I came against every obstacle known to man. But I reached out. I reached out to the people around me. And guess what? They showed up. And so I would agree with Christina Wolf. I don't really quite understand what this Human Relations Committee is doing. We've been here for how long? 49 minutes, and we spent how much time talking about two simple little amendments that asked this committee to limit government and represent all people? And we can't even do that? Like Mike Blessum spent a lot of time coming up with these two amendments. They were based on facts that have actually happened in North Dakota. So if we want everyone to be represented, if we want quality of life, we've got to do that on our own personal level. I don't think we can govern it. I don't think we can dictate it. Yeah, maybe a few people can make some recommendations, but those people, if not elected, shouldn't be making policy. The elected officials should make the policies and thereby have to answer to the voting community. And so why was this Human Relations Committee formed? And we were misrepresented there in the first place because the mayor was supposed to appoint 22 members. That did not happen. Mike Blessum said this is an ad hoc committee. It doesn't even have rights. Like, what are we doing here? I would like to know. I am kind of confused because I came from the Grand Forks community, and as far as I'm concerned, Minot, for the small community it is, has done a pretty good job. And I didn't walk around afraid for my life. I live alone. I'm 75 years old. I don't feel unsafe in Minot. And sure, maybe I wasn't welcome with open arms, but my feeling on this is I've got to reach out. And still in my community, even though I've been here this long, do you know what happens when new people move into my community? They're not coming to me. They don't come and say, oh, by the way, I moved in here. I go to them and I bring some banana bread or a gift and I say, welcome. And I am this person, and if you need any help, I'm here. And and that's the way it's been my whole life as long as I've been in Minot. We can't blame other people. If we expect to be treated with kindness, we need to show kindness. And I think we do that on a personal level, not by government dictating it to us, but personally acting on our own part. So I don't really understand. I am rather disappointed that Mike Blessum's amendments couldn't be accepted. I am very disappointed that Travis Slobotny asking that diversity be removed from there in education, because again, it's common sense that we all want quality of life for everyone. Is that not correct? That's our goal. And if it isn't our goal, we shouldn't be serving on committees. We shouldn't be serving on government boards.
If you could wrap up, please, you're at your time.
Pardon?
You're at your time. Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Fettig. I'm a resident of Minot. Just a couple of things I want to piggyback on what she said is she talked about common sense. You can't teach common sense. I don't believe that the committee can do education to teach common sense. Common sense is in relation to the values that we hold. I'm going to tell you a little story that recently occurred to me. Last week, I went to Walmart. I needed to pick up cases of water. I needed a certain size and a certain kind. And so I grabbed the cases that were on the shelf and I summoned a Walmart employee to help me to find out if they had additional cases in the back room. While I was waiting, I put the cases that were there in my cart and I stood there and waited for the Walmart employee to come back. In the meantime, a lady of another race came by. She examined all the water all the way down the aisle, and then she proceeded to take one case of water out of my cart and said, "You have enough." What is this committee going to do? What can they do to educate? That's common sense, common courtesy. I don't feel that government can teach people
to be courteous to others. We don't need to spend taxpayer dollars to educate that person. I needed to make a choice at that time whether I was going to say something to her or whether I was going to move on. And we need each person in our community to make a difference, not a statement from a committee to make a difference with kindness. The other thing I just want to say is that in relation to the rebuttal of, well, that's not in Bismarck's or in Dickinson's or whoever's bylaws or whatever you want to call them, I just like to know who made those communities the standard. And are they at a high level, or can we do better? I think Minot really needs to look at things and not just compare to other communities in North Dakota, but to look at what's best for the people of Minot and the state of North Dakota. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other final call for comments?
My name's Joan Hawbaker. I live right here in Minot. I have for over 30 years, and I'd like to agree with the others. Thank you for all of the effort that you've put in. I don't agree with this committee being formed, and I will admit I'm very, very disappointed that you don't seem to, a lot of you don't seem to agree with supporting all, because you wouldn't support Travis's amendment. That's what I got out of it. Whether that's what you meant, I don't know, but that's what I heard. Now, the other thing is, if you're here only to support some, since you wouldn't pass Travis's, which groups of people are you going to support and which ones are you going to say no? Or like a friend of mine said, she called a city council member on a certain situation and he said, well, you just have to be strong. That meant that she didn't matter, but the others did. And that doesn't seem like something that our committee or our city council should be doing. So that's my opinion. And the only other comment I have is if everybody could use your microphones or lean into them. We were having a really hard time actually hearing what I realized. The guys were good. We could hear those, but boy, some of you women, you need to lean into your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll try to do better on that.
Good evening. I'm Anna Dykman, a Minot resident. So celebrating diversity is exactly about celebrating all people, which is the opposite of discrimination. Equity and diversity are important components of a community that seeks to be welcoming. And as Minot continues to grow and strives to welcome all people, I thank the City Council for commissioning a group to explore exactly equity, diversity, and education. This work is valuable and forward-moving for our community. So thank you for your work, Human Relations Ad Hoc Committee. And together, we will keep on working for the rights, the health, and the equity of all people of this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Scott Samuelson. I'm a resident of Minot. I've watched this committee. I testified when it came the city council. I think the city council dropped the ball. They should have taken care of it themselves. I do appreciate everybody up here taking this up. I do not believe this is a role of government. There was one thing that was said during your conversations. it was brought up that we need social infrastructure. That scares me. That terrifies me. And it is called the Minot Human Relations Committee, not the Human Rights Committee. When we talk about human rights, this is different than relations. But we need not get that confused. And Miranda, if you're wondering, it was the city manager that made the comment about social infrastructure. This is not a perfect world, and it never will be. And at times, life is not fair. We need to take personal responsibility for our actions and what we expect. The government doesn't need to get in between relations with other people. Rights could be a different thing. But overall, we're talking about relations. This scares me. And I do believe that Minot is a very welcoming community. My wife and I moved here in 1989. We went through the flood in 2011. When I first moved to Minot, I didn't really care for Minot. I grew to find out that it's the most caring people on the face of this planet. And in 2011, when our home was about to be flooded, I found out what this community is like. I was doing service work for a plumbing company at the time. And I remember after the flood, driving around town, when people had their garage doors open full of furniture from someone else, and a lot of them, they didn't even know them before the flood happened. I had people in my house gutting it out that I had never met before and have become friends. So to say that this is not a welcoming committee, that is just false. And I appreciate all your guys' work, but this is not a role of government. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Charles Tuttle. I live in Minot here. Listening to all this, and I can remember about 8 years ago being in California when we were doing a petition against the transgender bathroom laws. And I kept telling friends of mine in North Dakota, yeah, it's coming here, it's coming here. This is an agenda of division. That's what this is all about. We're not really addressing real issues anymore. We're not addressing the pandemic, the masking of our children. We're not addressing the proficiency scores of our schools. We had the DPI, Superintendent of Public Instruction, tell legislators that we have schools with zero proficiency. It says right in our Constitution that we're supposed to be teaching our children a high degree of intelligence, patriotism, integrity, and morality on the part of every voter in order to preserve the government and the happiness and welfare of the people. Everybody needs to read our Constitution. It's better than the federal Constitution. We're neglecting our children. Now we're vaccinating them. The CDC just came out with numbers saying that if you've been vaccinated and boosted, that you have lost 24 years of your life expectancy. And we're not angry and upset that there's evidently a genocide going on. And you know what? 2 years ago, this administration knew that the vaccines were causing myocarditis in our children. That's heart disease. What is going on? We're sitting here talking about nonsensical things when the real quality of life is disappearing from us. Our workforce is gone. People are dying. Our elderly, 28 people died from Somerset. I can tell you some other places. We isolated our elderly and we kept them away from their family members. Why? So we could do what they did to them? And this is what we're worried about? We need to start thinking about what's really going on around us and the evidence that's there. And we need to start talking about it. And we need to stop this whatever it is that's going out there and destroying us. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, with that, I will close the public comment. So going back to where we are on the agenda is circling back to Lyanne, you had suggestions that you had handed out previously in regards to some changes. Do you want to make a motion regarding that?
Mr. Chair, could I bring a point of order? Do we want to address the written? Was there anything we needed to do with that?
Thank you. I
Okay.
apologize. Yes, Mike, I skipped that. Let's do that first. What's the best way to do this? Do we want to have them read into record? Do we want to have them submitted into record? What are your guys' thoughts?
They are on the public web, it is on the public website redacted for the personal information. So it is available to the public to read the comments. I simply brought it to the committee just so in case they didn't have time to access the website prior to the meeting, that it was publicly in front of them as well. So I don't know if there's really anything that the committee has to do with it unless you choose to read it out loud.
I think it should be read out loud so everyone can hear it.
Who wants to volunteer to do that?
You can do it.
Mike, you
Let me
want
do
to?
it?
Okay.
Sure. Okay, so this was submitted by email, correct? Or on the city website?
Correct, but I would refrain from
Yeah.
saying any personal information.
You bet. So the comments begin, congratulations and thank you for your hard work in preparing and presenting this report. I understand that there will be 2 proposed amendments, which I opposed, to wit, I believe the committee should have a budget and should be authorized to make public statements. I support the concepts that Minot should declare itself to be a diverse and welcoming community where our differences are seen as an asset. I also support the commitment, although not formally noted in the report, that the city should improve its advertising and recruitment and staffing for city employees and committee membership. I also see one of the roles of the Human Relations Committee to take public comments on current issues and on ways the city can be more welcoming and on changes the city could implement practices to attain these goals. I am impressed with how far we have come since June 23rd. I commend the ad hoc committee members for your hard work and time commitment and thoughtful cooperation in the hard work of governing. Again, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mike, for reading that and saving my voice. So, all right. Any other comments on that? So then we will move on to, with that officially closing all the public hearing, circling back to Lyanne, your amendments that you had handed out. So what I would look for first is a motion by you to make the amendments as presented.
So do you want me to do each one separately? I would prefer to do each one separately.
Each one's,
I mean, because some of them are just like,
The city attorney can also maybe help in this situation. If it's just changing the human, or where it says rights to relations, I don't know if that would have to be an amendment because I believe that's discussion you guys have already had, correct?
I guess a point of order on that one. I'm not sure that, especially in those first ones, I think that's substantive. Because I think when we're making objectives there, it's not whether we are a human rights committee, it's saying whether we're focused on human rights versus relations. That's my opinion.
Mr. Chair.
yeah.
I believe that the Article 3 that we're referring to, that came from the August 29th meeting, which is one of our first meetings, if I remember. And I believe it was the meeting after that, where we had discussed in depth changing the word rights to relations throughout the document. And I believe this might have just been an area where it was missed.
Stephanie, do you have some input here?
I think that if there's any dispute over what language you want to include in here, I would do a motion in a second.
so I'm going to excuse me, I'm not going to stop. I'm gonna start. With the first one, which is above Article 3, which I have in red, where I've added the word Minot. So I move that we add Minot to that part above there to make it consistent with the name of the organization or the committee.
Okay, can I get a second?
Second.
We have a second. Discussion, Lyanne?
I just think that we need to be consistent. That was in the name of and I didn't type out all Article 1, but we've got that in front of us, but to add Minot in there because that would just be consistent.
Just as a quick point, is that in the rest of the commissions that are laid out in ordinance? Do we typically call it Minot Planning Commission?
Not, if I may,
Yep.
not typically, because they're all contained within Minot's code of ordinances, but if it brings the committee comfort to add the name there, it doesn't hurt any.
Sure. And just to continue, one of the things from our very early discussions, another thought that I had was, in some ways, I'd kind of like you to have your thought process going forward. If these are coming up in ordinance, do we want to set a precedent that this is the right way? And so that's the only other consideration. I'm ambivalent one way or the other. I don't know that it matters. It is within the Minot ordinances, so I think it's implied. But if we want to set that precedent, it could be a good time to do it because we're opening an ordinance right now.
And this is why I brought it up to appreciate not only for us, but for the public, why, and have consistency and discuss why we do what we do or why we think the way we think. So I'm fine either way. I just think just to have clarity and consistency, and I'm fine either way.
Any other comments? I'll say that I like the idea of putting mine out here because I actually agree with some of the comments. I think we are better than the other cities that have done this. I think this is a better better ordinance than the other cities that have done it. And I like putting that pride in there, so.
A point of order, do we have a motion and a second to add Minot
Yeah.
too? Okay.
Who made the second? Miranda did, thank you. Okay. Any other discussion? All right, call the roll.
Zeltinger,
Yes.
Blessum,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Dykeman,
Yes.
Mathested,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Schuler,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Zablotny.
No.
Okay, next motion.
On Article 3 under the objectives, I move to change the term rights to, or the word rights to relations to make it consistent throughout.
Okay, there's a motion. Let's get a second.
Second.
Travis seconds. Discussion, or do you want to finish explaining quickly, Ann, and then we'll go to you.
You stopped me.
I know.
That's good. I'm glad you did. Because we have discussed this so thoroughly, whether we're going to be a rights committee or a relations committee, I think that we need that consistency. Very important right there.
Denise first.
Yes, we did discuss this at length, and we chose the word rights intentionally, I believe, here. I don't think this is a clerical error. I do believe that this is an intentional choice that we did discuss at length, and so I will be opposing this change.
Okay, Miranda?
I was just going to say the opposite, so say what I said earlier, that I thought that we discussed it. My interpretation of how the meeting went was we were changing it. I could be wrong. I could go back and rewatch it.
Okay, other discussion?
Just a point of clarification. We are doing both 1 and 3 together, right? Just to be clear. Okay.
You guys both okay with that? For clarity, okay. All right, any further discussion? All right, call the roll.
Zeltinger,
Yes.
Blessum,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Dykeman,
No.
Mathested,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Schuler,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Zablotny.
Yes.
All right, Leanne, next one.
All right, then I move under Article 5, under the meetings, to change the order. Oh, I left out number 4. I'm sorry. I went.
You can go back. We haven't made a motion.
Sorry,
yet,
okay,
so.
thank you. I move that we strike that number 4 then from Article 3 to encourage adherence to federal and state laws regarding civil and human rights. I removed that.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion, Leanne? And then got you next.
We can, in this committee, we cannot encourage or force anything with the federal and state laws. We've already have those in place. So they would be already being followed without this committee. So I don't think we need to bring that into the committee.
Denise?
Again, this is exactly what we discussed, and this is why the terms rights was in there in the first place. This is why this provision is in here. If we weren't talking about civil and human rights, then this Part 4 wouldn't be here, okay? So I think that it's important for us to have a role in helping educate the community about their rights. You all do have rights at the federal level and the state level regarding things like housing discrimination, okay? And all kinds of different rights. And I think that this city could do a better job of helping people understand what those rights are. And that could be a good function for this committee. And so I oppose this change and I would like to keep this language. Thank you.
Travis?
I see this in this committee akin to a tax, trying to think of the name of the committee that will review your assessment on your taxes, the tax assessment committee, ultimately having something in their statement saying that they are there to encourage the adherence of the payment of taxes to the county or city. That's not their job. Their job is to listen to the concern and make a decision as to whether action needs to be taken. It's not to encourage them to go pay their taxes.
Mike?
So actually, Committee Member Dykeman, I think that language here actually is not what you were just talking about. I actually do kind of have a soft spot in my heart for helping people understand when they might have been discriminated against and what they should do about that. This says to encourage adherence. This says to me that landlord, this says to me that business owner, you will follow the law. And we're going to encourage that. That's what this language says. I'm not necessarily opposed to what you're saying, but that's what this is about. This is saying you will do this or you should do this.
It does encourage adherence with the law. Why wouldn't we want to do that?
Make sure you speak into the microphone.
I said, why wouldn't we want to encourage adherence with the law? That's not forcing anyone to do anything.
Yeah, and I think it is the purview of government across the board to encourage adherence with our laws, with duly passed laws. You bet it is. That's not at all what you were talking about. And so the question here would be, what does that actually mean? We've already removed a section that has to do with grievance. We've removed the sections I was concerned about related to what Fargo did, where they literally sent committee members, if we were the committee, the three of you go to this business owner and ask him what he did about that guy that said that on the bus. That happened. That's what Fargo did. To me, that's what this statement says, to encourage adherence to federal and state law. I don't think we want to be in that business. We're advisory to the council on other topics that can come up. If you look at 3 right above that, we're going to identify issues of concern regarding those relations in Minot and make recommendations to the council. That's what advisory in nature does. Encouraging adherence steps too far.
Miranda?
I just want to state that we did these in an order where this specific Article 3 was one of the first ones we addressed on the 29th of August. Afterwards, later on, we eliminated the grievance procedure, which I think was absolutely the right thing for us to do. And in October, I believe, we changed the authority of the committee to advisory in nature. I think removing number 4 of Article 3 makes sense to coincide with the changes that were made after that initial meeting.
My only comment on this is that, and I don't think we're extraordinarily far apart on kind of what our intention is here. One of the things that we heard during public comment before, and I've heard from constituents, is it's not the role of this committee to enforce human rights, human federal law and stuff like that. And I absolutely agree. Last thing I want to do is to begin to muddy that water, nor do I feel that that's the role of even necessarily city government. That being said, I think reading into a little bit more of what you said, Mike, which is, here's examples of federal law so that you're not out of compliance. Here's examples of, and as a business owner, we all get that when we talk about human relations rules, like what are the things we're allowed to ask during interviews and the things we're not allowed to ask. Like we all have that, that we have that interest in adhering to federal and state law in order to, not get sued, but also, do things the right way. So I don't have any opposition to this statement being because it does say encourage adherence to, not enforce. And I think that's the clarity that needs to be made. So Travis?
I guess I'd like to ask our city attorney her opinion on what position that puts the city in legally should we start trying to interpret federal and state laws and providing any sort of recommendations as a body?
So my interpretation of this statement is that it is to encourage adherence to federal and state laws. I don't see any enforcement mechanism in here. And then this particular article is about the objectives, though, of the committee. So what is it that you want the committee to do? It seems like we've kind of settled on 1, 2, and 3. 4 is, do we want to encourage adherence to federal and state laws? In prior conversations, we kind of had some concern about educating. Do we want to educate? That seems like it's kind of somewhat in line with encouraging adherence to federal and state laws regarding civil and human rights, which I assume we'd also want to switch to relations if we were to keep this language, to keep it consistent with the changes that were just made. But I don't see it as the committee is being charged with enforcing federal and state laws. It's to encourage adherence to them.
Denise and then Travis.
Yeah, I think the words rights there is important. I think this then harkens back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. These are civil rights that include protection from unlawful discrimination, and those are the kinds of the things that we want our business owners and others to make sure that they're aware of and are adhering to. We want people to be in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We want people to be in compliance with the Civil Rights Act and know what those are. I was reading a housing discrimination report, and one of the findings in the report was that there was a lot of education and awareness that needed to happen here in North Dakota about what these laws are and what they mean for everyday people, right? And so I think that's an important role that this committee could play. And I would leave the language just as it is.
Travis?
So I think I can understand the response from our city attorney, but my concern is exactly the statement you made in terms of becoming advisory in a sense. And we're not attorneys. I think we're out of our realm 100% by even starting to go down the road of thinking we understand fully what it means to be adhering to these laws in this body. And I'm not sure what we're doing as city government getting involved in that. It's going to lead to problems that I think that we are unprepared for and don't need, and I would not support, or I'd support striking it.
Well, if I can respond to that, Travis, I will say during the last city council meeting, I used my professional expertise on the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I am well qualified to speak on that. And what I did, and I used that for using my expertise, was to clarify misunderstandings that were happening within the community. And that's where oftentimes it's the misunderstandings around potential human rights and human and federal and state laws that can actually cause more harm than actually good interpretation of them. So using that ability to clarify, now that wasn't in this role, but that doesn't mean that there won't be potential members of this committee in the future who don't have areas of expertise. So, yeah.
And I guess in the next article we're going to take up, it talks about the order is introduce guests and guest speakers. And so any area where we feel that it's not our expertise, we might have a whole array of people that we can invite to come in and, give us an introduction or give us the information that we need in order to make our recommendation to the city council.
Mike, I believe you had your hand up.
I'm good.
Okay. Other? All right, call the roll.
Zeltinger,
Yes.
Blessum,
Yes.
Burlingame,
No.
Dykeman,
No.
Mathested,
No.
Olson,
Yes.
Schuler,
Yes.
Bailey,
No.
Zablotny.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. Okay. Next.
Under Article 5 for the meetings, all I did was rearrange the order, so I move to place the introductions under B and then just follow through on and keeping the new business empty and open.
Okay. Second, is there a second?
Second.
Alderwoman Olson seconds. Discussion. No discussion? All right, call the roll?
Zeltinger,
Yes.
Blessum,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Dykeman,
Sure. Yes.
Mathested,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Schuler,
No.
Staley,
No.
Zablotny.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, next.
And the last one, under 8, this is just maintain continuity of the wording. And I realized that I forgot to strike out the word "they." So I'll read how it says, how it's parliamentary, well, let me back up. Or do I just stop there and then discuss? I just move that we change it so that the wording has some continuity to the
Okay.
entire article.
Excuse me? Sorry, we don't have a copy of that.
It's on the bottom of the.
Oh, election of officers? Okay, sorry.
But do you know where she's at? 'Cause I think
That was different. Okay, no problem.
The election, yeah, I want to make sure.
You want me to read how I want them to? So under the election of officers. So this, it says the
Okay, go ahead.
secretary, now, this is not the part that I want to change. The secretary for the Human Relations Committee will be a non-voting appointee by the city manager and will be responsible for secretarial duties as described in Article 9 of this ordinance. And then the parliamentarian will be a non-voting appointee of the city attorney's office appointed by the city manager. And then I would strike out the word "they" and put "and", will be responsible for ensuring meetings are conducted in accordance with the ordinance and the duties as described in Article 9 of this ordinance. That just maintains the continuity from the city manager and will be responsible.
Okay, is there a second now that we all know what we're voting
I'll
for?
second.
Second.
Okay, Mike got in there first, so discussion? Okay,
Lyanne, do you see it on your screen? Sorry, point of order.
yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Does that look accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, now that we're all clear of what we're voting for, right? All right, call the roll.
Zeltinger,
Yes.
Blessum,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Dykeman,
Yes.
Mathested,
Yes.
Olson, Schuler,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Zablotny.
Yes.
Okay, is that the last of your motions?
That's all.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, could I bring a motion? At the beginning of this process, I think I promised everybody that I would give you one more chance at the end to decide that this whole path has been the wrong path. And I'm not choosing to make this an hour-long discussion. That's not my point whatsoever. But I do want to hold true to what I said at the beginning, which is to say this has never been the purview of government. This has never been something that should have been brought forward. And I would move that we bring a message to the city council that the ordinance itself should be removed and that we have no recommendation for fixing it.
Okay, is there a second? Lyanne seconds.
And if I can continue, yep. And again, this is not meant to turn into a long discussion. All that I want to say was, I said what I meant at the beginning. I'm saying it again now. I believe that this is the wrong path for our city. This is not whatsoever the purview of government, and this should never have been in the ordinance in the 70s in the first place.
Miranda?
Thank you. You and Lisa might be able to give us more clarity, but didn't the city council pass a moratorium where we could not give that recommendation as a committee?
That would not be my understanding of the moratorium, but that's probably more for the city attorney.
I can pull up the moratorium too. One moment.
Do you have a recommendation yet, Stephanie, or a thought on that?
Just reading through so here's I'll highlight the paragraph regarding the moratorium imposed. And it states the city council hereby imposes a moratorium on any of the activities set forth in the current Human Relations Committee ordinance. It states during this period, the ad hoc committee on human relations in cooperation with city staff is directed to develop a plan to study this section of the Code of Ordinances, hold public hearings as needed, determine the impact of this ordinance on the city, and to make a recommendation to the city council regarding whether the ordinance should remain in effect. So whether it should remain into effect, and if so, make a recommendation on any amendments that could be made. So I don't think that the motion is out of order.
Yeah, so just to continue on that, I think it's clear that the part of it that said whether the ordinance should remain in effect is exactly the spirit that the city council wanted from our committee. Now, whether they agree with my way of looking at it isn't exactly, that's part of the debate right now. So the thing that I would say, just to continue, is that we heard from members of the public tonight, many of which would agree with me. And again, that's a small microcosm. I'm not expecting everybody to believe that that's the sentiment out there. That's who showed up tonight. But we did have others that showed up that supported this wholeheartedly. And I don't want to dismiss that. I don't want anybody to think that I don't think that there are things that the people of Minot could do better to welcome our neighbors and to welcome others and make them feel like this is a good place to live. What I am concerned about, though, is that most of the people in support of this committee and of this ordinance are looking to government to solve things for them. And government is terrible at that. It's terrible. And so what we have to be careful about is that when we choose to have government and government committees take that role, it tells the public you don't have a responsibility anymore. The government will do it for you, and you don't have to solve it yourself. And I don't think we want that. I think we want to say to everybody, this is your responsibility. As Scott so well put it, this community is wonderful to each other. Not in every case, but in the vast majority of cases. Our Red Cross shelters were empty during the flood. We all took care of our neighbors. We do that naturally. And what we need to be doing is encouraging people to do that, not using the force of government to mandate it. Because what you mandate from the government is what's going to be fought. And so, again, I will implore you, this is not the path the government should be taking.
Lisa?
Thank you, Scott. I do have some comments that I've put together, and I wanted to wait on these comments because I definitely did want to hear what was said tonight. But I think that this will be a good response to some of the questions and comments made, and it will certainly respond to Mike's motion on the floor. So number one, first and foremost, I do want to thank everybody on this committee who volunteered their time and worked diligently through the weeks-long process of reviewing and updating the Human Relations Committee ordinance. Your level of professionalism and cooperation has been outstanding. And in response, when people asked why this committee was initiated, it was the action of the city council, who believed it was important to spend a lot of time discussing this ordinance. And that's exactly what it was. It was not pushing the can down the road. It wasn't dropping the responsibility of the city council members. It was giving the opportunity to have the discussion. Number two, I've stayed involved in this work, which began 9 months ago, because I strive to make Minot a community where everyone does feel safe and welcomed. It is the reason that I have served on Minot City Council for 14 years. Making this community a place where people want to live, work, and play is my mantra. I have kept an open mind, wanting to hear what the committee members, and now tonight, the community members have to say about this ordinance. I believe that I have learned through this process. However, tonight is the night when we are tasked with making an important decision. The way that I choose to vote tonight is not about picking sides or trying to limit the voice of any individuals or groups. My vote will reflect how I believe the city of Minot should interact or intercede on anyone's behalf. Minot City Council has a history of hearing and acting on things brought to our attention. A few years ago, we weren't aware of the limitations of accessible taxi cabs for individuals who depend on a wheelchair for transportation. We took action and now require all taxi cab companies to have at least one accessible vehicle. More recently, a woman brought a request to us to look into changes at an intersection in southwest Minot that had seen a number of accidents. This woman's friend had recently lost his life in a motorcycle accident. After hearing this request, action was taken to alter access to and from this intersection. These are just a few examples of when it was appropriate for the City Council to take action. No matter what happens with the Human Relations Committee, the only authority to make changes will still lie with the City Council. After recently hearing a testimony from a military veteran who enjoys some camaraderie with fellow vets in a group called Vet Care, I started to research how many different groups or organizations are available to the residents in Minot. The list that is maintained by the Minot Public Library lists over 500. 500 opportunities for residents to join a group, to talk, to learn, to participate, to teach, to enjoy, to support, or to advocate. I have created a list, which now the city attorney is showing on the screen, of over 150 opportunities taken from the Minot Public Library list that represent many of the groups that were considered in the Human Relations Committee ordinance. I strongly believe that with this many options, residents in Minot should be seeking out involvement in this fashion. Quite frankly, the Human Relations Committee could never do justice to these 150 unique groups. Finally, if there is a problem, a concern, a need for education, any of these groups or individuals can come to the City Council to seek out support, intercession, or a public bully pulpit to spotlight what needs attention at that time. So taking all of this information into consideration, I will be voting against the proposed HRC ordinance with the intent of voting to delete the ordinance from Minot's Code of Ordinances. Thank you.
Thanks. So my question is this: our ad hoc committee, all of us were put together to revise the existing ordinance that stands currently within city law, to update it, whether we necessarily believed in it or not. If we submit that to the council, what's to stop us as individual members from going before the council at that meeting and stating the same thing, that we don't believe this should be an ordinance? Our job was to revise what exists on law right now.
If I may respond, I believe our job was to revise and to make a recommendation.
Yeah, and just to follow on to that, I think it was very clear in what the city attorney just reviewed that this was one possible outcome, was that we could return a recommendation that says the ordinance shouldn't exist in the first place. And I got to tell you, I believe that that is the right path. And I think what I would say is that I was a willing participant in this. When the mayor asked me to do it, I said, absolutely, I will. And I think the discussion we had was very important. If the ordinance goes forward and the council adopts it, I feel comfortable that the work that we did makes it a better ordinance than it was. And that's why it was important to me to participate, to work hard line by line with all of you to do that. I would like to say that we can return something that says go ahead and delete it, but if they're going to take it up, I think we've got a better version, and I feel proud of that.
Miranda?
One more question. So if we did make a recommendation to remove this from ordinance for the city to the council as council members, could you, or would the council still have the ability to look at the document as revised and decide against our ordinance? My fear would be, I want to make sure that they have both of them presented. The council ultimately has the decision to make the call on what they want to do. I would really like them, as the elected officials, to be the one that make that decision. And at least I appreciate your stance on this. You are an elected official. I think that should fall directly on our elected officials.
Denise, you were next.
Oh, thank you. Mike, you have raised this repeatedly, and we're well aware now that you are not in favor of this committee and have been opposed to it from day one. And you have brought up the role of government several times. And what I have here in front of me is a little document that they give out to newly elected congressmen and women when they start their role as representatives. And the publication is called Our American Government. And I highly recommend that you find it. It's a great little document about civics in this country. The first part, number one, what is the purpose of the U.S. government? The purpose is expressed in the preamble to the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution. We can just look to that for the reason for our government to exist, all right? The United States is great not because we're all the same and we're afraid of each other. The United States is great because we're enormously diverse and we're able to take advantage of all those diverse ideas, foods, languages, ideas, cultures, and turn those into this more perfect union. And that means learning about each other. That means celebrating each other. And I think that that's what this committee can help us do. And so I will be voting in favor of this ordinance going forward to City Council and against Mike Blessum's motion. Thank you.
More? Anybody else have comments? Mike?
So, and I think maybe just more of a point of order to make sure we understand what's going to play out. So right now we have a motion, my motion, which says we're going to return a recommendation that says just delete the ordinance overall, not whatever else we add onto that. That, I think, to Miranda's point, does not necessarily give the council our draft. Now, it doesn't mean they couldn't go look at it because it's in the public record essentially. But that returns that recommendation. So without that, you two as council members, do you feel that you would have the power if the council decides they don't like the recommendation, which is a possibility, that they could resurrect the draft because it exists, it's not gone. They could just essentially go against our recommendation, take up the draft as is, and start working from there. Because you could still have more amendments and edits and all kinds of stuff. So in my mind, that leaves all of that on the table. All that we're doing is saying, as a group, we came to the end and we decided by a vote, here's where we're at. You do your work now, is my thought.
So most likely, Mike, the work of this committee, the minutes of this committee, all that process would be included in our minutes as we're making that discussion. So whatever this final draft is would be available. It would obviously mean that it would take some sort of a motion or some sort of a alderman to put forward this and to begin that process. So am I wrong, you guys? You can definitely correct me.
So I guess I would refer the draft at this point as this is just the last draft the committee has reviewed. You haven't necessarily voted on approving it as like the committee's final draft recommendation. So if we want to consider this document that I have up on my screen right now to be considered the city's the Human Relations Committee's last draft, that's how I would refer to it, not necessarily the entire committee's recommendation, because it sounds like there's a difference of opinion here on whether or not we think this is complete or not.
Yeah.
So one thought, and I'm not quite to amending my motion yet. I just want to throw this out for food for thought. The recommendation that I'm suggesting that we make is to delete it. I am not necessarily opposed to saying, here's where we left off. We put in a lot of work to get to that point. And if we're going to remain with an ordinance, we think this is better than current. But our recommendation as a committee is that the ordinance be scrapped. I may be amenable to that, but I'd love to hear a little more discussion on what people think of that.
So just kind of for your information on how the agenda items get placed is a staff member or one of the chairmen would produce a memo. If you notice on any of the agendas, not so much the HRC ones, but the city council ones, there is a recommended action. So what you'd be voting on now would be a recommended action, essentially, but the council doesn't have to take that action. So I would still provide whatever draft you end with as part of documentation, so that could there be more conversation with the council, it would be provided.
So the alternative to my motion right now would be to go away from this and come back and say, we would have a motion to adopt this as the recommended draft and to return a recommendation to council to accept it as written. That's the alternative motion to mine if we went the other direction.
Are you talking about the alternative motion in a memo that we normally have?
So my point is, if my motion were to die right now, if it didn't pass, we would actually want to do that. We would want another motion then that comes and says, we are voting to adopt the draft as written and return to a recommendation to council that they adopt it as written.
I would say yes, unless any other staff members say wrong. There's usually always a recommended action with an action item on the council agenda.
Harold?
So again, talking about how we prepare agendas as staff for council, the city clerk is correct. But we also include alternatives. So this could be one of the alternates, whoever prepares the memo, this would be one of the alternates that would be prepared on there. We also include attachments, and we provide any pertinent documentation that we feel this council needs in order to make an informed decision with regards to that matter. So your current recommended or not recommended, whatever your final product is of the work that you've done over the last few months, that final version in a red line version and in a clean version would be provided to the city council as attachments to that document as part of the memo for the council to make their decision ultimately on what they do. And then if I may real quickly, just add a historical point here, because it was mentioned during the public hearing of how did this whole thing start. Alderwoman Olson, you talked about 9 months ago. 9 months ago is when this became a public issue and the community started talking about it. The conversation about the Human Relations Commission actually started in 2022 when I came in as the new city manager and reviewing through the city ordinances, identified boards and committees and commissions that were on the books that were not filled and were not operating, and asked the council for clarification on whether or not these committees or commissions still had value, and if they did, then we needed to fill them and put them to work, or they need to be eliminated from the ordinance so we didn't have something on the books in ordinance that we weren't doing. At that point, I think one or two of the boards or commissions were eliminated. Alderwoman Evans, I think at that point the council said that this needed further conversation. Alderwoman Evans volunteered to make a draft of changes, which was then brought to the council 9 months ago. That is when the public started paying attention to the conversation, as it should, as part of the transparency. And then ultimately, I think everyone knows where it went from there. But I think we forget that this process actually started 12, 15 months ago, not 9 months ago.
Travis?
I'm not sure if this is out of order, but I'd like to make a motion that we approve the current draft as the final draft from this committee at this point.
Okay, go ahead. We got some.
We do already have a motion on the floor, but it sounds as though Committee Member Blessom, you're amenable to an amendment to the motion. So perhaps you want to offer an amendment to the motion that the recommendation of the committee be, as Committee Member Blessom has stated, to remove the ordinance. But in the alternative, should the council choose to adopt a second version of the ordinance, that the committee adopt this draft as its official recommendation.
Okay, so I'll make that motion. So I think that's the way that we need it. So I would be amending my original motion, right? And we would need agreement from the second. So the original motion was to send a recommendation to the council to remove the ordinance. What I'll add is that we also return to them our final draft, which is the red line and a clean version, as well as the output of the committee's work for their information.
So we're looking for a friendly amendment, so did you second that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Are
That's
you
fine,
friendly?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, friendly amending.
Yes. Okay. Discussion.
Talking about removing the old 1970s ordinance and replacing it.
So actually a question for the city attorney. Does removing an ordinance require 2 readings? Is it the same process? Okay, so it would go through the same normal process among the council that they would take to remove any ordinance.
Well said. Miranda?
I personally believe in limited government. I have looked at this ordinance with completely neutral eyes and gone through the motions, as all of us have, to revise it to what we feel like is the best ordinance for our city. I have a hard time, although I personally think it should go away. That's the first time I have said this, and that's how I felt since the beginning. I have a hard time submitting that recommendation to the council. I feel like, with the exception of Scott and Lisa, we've done all the work, and the elected officials just get to make one decision based on the recommendation of this group. I would prefer we submit the ordinance as amended, maybe with a suggestion of eliminating the ordinance, not a recommendation, and leave that on our elected officials. I think it's important for those people that live in this city to know exactly how their elected officials feel on this. Right now, they don't, other than the two that are sitting on this board, and maybe Alderman Evans, or Alderwoman Evans.
Go ahead.
Excuse me, I'd like a clarification on recommendation versus suggestion. I think those are the same thing, and the council would still be able to discuss, correct? Even on the recommendation, they couldn't just, or they just say yes or no, or can they discuss on your recommendation?
They,
Go ahead.
if I may, they would be able to discuss it.
Mike?
So, and actually, this is, I think, a question under the process by which the memo is brought with the recommendation. Is there a third option where no recommendation is brought? And it's believe me, it's not my intent. I would like to see a recommendation brought, but I just want to know procedurally, are there things that city staff just says, we don't have a horse in this race, so we're neutral?
In this situation, the recommendation comes from this committee. The only staff member that I could think of that would provide a recommendation would be myself, and I have no intent of providing a recommendation for or against the work of this committee, so.
Smart man.
So, but just to follow up, just procedurally, my question really is there a third option? It's recommend yes, recommend no, recommend maybe, just as a fast way to say it.
I mean, summarizing months of work here, the options are you could leave the ordinance as it stands, currently on city ordinance. The council could adopt the work of this committee off of what you have as your red line version here today. The third option would be is to remove the ordinance completely, and there would be no human relations committee, commission in any format on the books of the city. And then the fourth option would be, it would be a hybrid of leaving it on the books, but the council making changes to the ordinance as they see fit, whether that's a mix of what the current ordinance is and what the work of this committee has been. The council has the ability to do that. Outside of those four options, I can't think of any other alternatives the council would have in front of them.
So just to continue then, really where we stand right now, we have a motion on the floor. We did an amendment to say that we're going to return the output as part of our recommendation, that we did the work, we did what they asked. And so I think that's where we're at, right? We really have a vote right now, which is on a recommendation to delete the ordinance. That is my motion. And that would be that full-throated recommendation right in the memo.
So just a point of clarity then too, the recommendation would be in the memo, and the alternatives could be the other things you just talked about, correct, Harold?
That's correct. On the memo, the recommendation would be the recommendation of this committee, whatever you guys as a majority decide. And then underneath the alternatives section would be those four options that I outlined, but there would be no recommendation from staff with regards to one of those alternatives overriding the recommendation of this committee.
Travis?
I don't think this group is constituted a weak people whatsoever, and let's not avoid the decision, avoid the conversation. Let's not play that same game. We were brought here to make a recommendation, and at the same time, the city council will still be forced to make their opinion known. They still have to vote on whatever recommendation we make and make their own. So there's no sense in doing anything other than taking a vote on this. If it passes, it passes. If it fails, it fails. The city council still will be on the record where they stand.
Other discussion?
I'm sorry, maybe it's because it's like almost 8 o'clock and I haven't eaten dinner, but I do not understand the motion on the floor at this point. You could help me out,
Yep.
Mike.
So to clarify, the motion is to return a recommendation to city council that the entire ordinance be removed from the law. And that the output of the committee be included along with that to say this is where we got to in terms of a draft, but our recommendation is that it be removed.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Everybody's clear on what we're voting on? All right, call the roll.
Blessum,
Yes.
Burlingame.
No.
Dykeman,
No.
Mathested,
No.
Olson,
Yes.
Schuler,
No.
Staley,
No.
Zablotny,
Yes.
Zeltinger.
Yes.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. Is there another motion? Miranda?
Do we have to submit a motion, or can we just submit the 3 options that the city council will have to move forward? I do not want, under any circumstance, to keep the existing ordinance the way it stands. Are we able to supply the 3 options that they have so that they can move forward from there?
If I may, again, it's highlighted on the screen. This ad hoc committee was created to provide the council a recommendation with your expertise and your differences of perspectives and all those varieties on whether or not this ordinance should continue to exist, and if it should continue to exist, in what format that should exist. So I believe that the council is looking for a recommendation from this committee about whether or not there should be a human relations committee. Denise?
Then I will make a motion to put forward a recommendation to the city council that this ordinance should remain in effect and that we have finalized our recommendations on amendments that could be made, and those are included for their consideration.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Janet seconds.
Can I get some clarification on that? Are you clarifying to keep the current ordinance or the recommendations of what you've done at the committee as the ordinance?
I think that their ask, if you have it up on the screen again, the ask is whether or not, can you put that back up? Yeah. Regarding whether the ordinance should remain in effect, the human relations ordinance. I don't think we're making a judgment on what that should look like exactly, except to say that this is our recommendation on the amendments that could be made to Division 4, Chapter 2, Article 5 of the Code of Ordinances.
Okay. Clear on that?
So the red line version is what you're recommending to them?
Yes, this red line version that we have finalized here this evening after many months of discussion and work would be our recommended, whatever it says in the, it's not on the screen anymore.
Janet, I think, was first. Sorry. Did you have one? Or did I not?
Oh,
I'm sorry,
no,
maybe
no.
I just saw my.
Janet
clear mic.
seconded, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so to be clear, we are now exactly in what I said. We had 2 alternatives for motions. We had a motion that said we will return a recommendation that it doesn't need to continue. This one says absolutely it does. This one says it will remain law. And it also says, yeah, we've got some amendments and you can take them if you like. Or you could leave the current one in place. And so I just want to be clear, because the discussion we just had was not exactly that. The discussion we had a minute ago was, here's our recommendations, please take them, and this is the recommendation of the group.
Just as a point of order, the council doesn't have to do anything for the law to stay in effect. On January 1st, or, when the big apple drops or whatever, that law goes back into effect. So this council doesn't have to do anything to keep the law into effect. So just for clarity's sake here, that is the case.
And just to clarify that a little further, that is what we're saying here. This recommendation will say it should be in effect and the committee should exist.
Janet?
So I guess just for my clarification too, I'm assuming I seconded that we would recommend that the council would update the ordinance with this red line document that we've spent all these months working on. That's how I'm understanding it, would be our recommendation, that
they would be discarding what's on the books currently, updating it with all of these red line amendments, and that if this were to pass, that's what would be recommending to them.
Diane?
So going forward, and I'm looking in the future, because from the very beginning, when I read the very first new proposed ordinance by Alderwoman Evans, my first concern was reading about discrimination and how we were going to handle discrimination in Minot, whether it was going to be actual or perceived discrimination. And those 2 points right there concerned me deeply, because we, not this committee, but the committee itself would be made up of laypersons who are not trained in knowing how to handle whether a discriminatory act is actual an act and needs to go through the legal recourse, or, and there are 2 perceived discriminations, I did learn that, but perceived discrimination or the feelings of not feeling safe need to be dealt with people who are specifically trained and can pick up on the cues, whether someone is on the verge of extreme anger, on the verge of suicide, on the verge of just falling out of society. They handle that. This committee cannot do that. To this day, I don't understand what this committee is actually going to accomplish other than just getting together. And we can do that sitting around the coffee shop and all of us just getting together without having this committee. So I mean, I don't see objectives in this committee. And I have not from day one, and I have been at every meeting. I have listened to, I have re-listened. To this day, I cannot fix if somebody else feels badly. There are days every day that I feel badly. I don't expect anybody else to come and, well, they can't. They can't correct that. That has to come from within, or I have to reach out, like one of the public speakers said today. I have to reach out, and that is where the human compassion comes in. That doesn't come from government. I can tell you that. It comes from each of us to each other. Until you can prove to me that this committee is going to have an actionable, definitive purpose, I can't support it at all. We've been through all of this, and I can't support it at this point yet.
Further discussion? Denise?
And maybe it makes sense to split this apart and have a vote on whether or not the ordinance should remain in effect, a recommendation on whether the ordinance should remain in effect, and then the recommendation on any amendments. Per what I would like to end this meeting and move forward with our work and give our recommendations to the city council, however that needs to happen. And it looks like what we've been asked to do is make a recommendation regarding whether the ordinance should remain in effect and a recommendation on any amendments that could be made by them. That seems pretty clear to me.
Travis?
You omitted very important language.
What is that?
It says, to make a recommendation to the city council regarding whether the ordinance should remain in effect, and if so, make a recommendation on any amendments that could be made to the Division 4 of Chapter 2. It didn't say make 2 recommendations. It said if you're going to recommend it goes forward, and if so, make a recommendation on adjustments.
That's why I was reading it that way the first time, but it seems to be.
I still have a real hard time with the council pushing a group of volunteer citizens to be the ones to be the people in the community that make this decision. So what I would like to suggest as a recommendation would be, and I know we have a motion on the floor and we have a second, but should it fail, I would follow up with a recommendation to approve the revised ordinance should council deem the committee remain in effect. That puts the the council back on the hot seat to determine what they want to do with this ordinance. We've done the work. We're presenting them the revised ordinance. It eliminates the existing ordinance, which we all know is flawed, and it gives the public the ability to come before the council members who they have elected and hold them accountable for how they vote on this, rather than those of us just being citizens within the community. It's not our job. We aren't elected. You're not electing us to sit up here on this. We are citizens just like you, doing the work for our government. I really strongly believe this needs to go to the council. And when you talk about kicking the can, they're kicking the can to us to be the bad guys if we don't make them make this decision. So that would be what I would follow up with, should this recommendation not pass.
Mike?
So, Miranda, I'm with you in spirit. Believe me, from the very beginning, that's been my take on it. My only problem with it is they were very specific about what they said. They said we need to provide a recommendation as to whether the ordinance should remain in effect. Yes or no? I think that's pretty clear in what we were asked. I guess I don't know a good way around it. Here's the thing that I would say: regardless of which way we return, we're somewhere in a very close vote. I mean, I think we all feel that up here. I mean, the last motion failed 5-4. This one could go 5-4 either way. I don't think we know yet. It's going to be very divided. We have two of the council members sitting with us. They certainly know the sentiments of the committee. They know that while there was a lot of discussion and a lot of good discussion throughout this entire process, they know the issues. And I believe the two of them will do a great job of representing that during council meetings. I would commend Councilwoman Olson tonight for essentially taking a stand this early. Again, that doesn't obligate you to your final vote because there could be plenty of amendments. There's lots that can still happen, but I believe the two of them have done a strong enough job, and I feel comfortable at this point, regardless of which way we have that final 5-4 recommendation, that the council will take this up and do their jobs, and understanding that a few of them next summer will be accountable for it. And a few of them will be accountable in the next election if they're not as well. And it's our job, those of us who are not elected officials, to make sure that that's the case. That's what we have to do as citizens.
Okay. Further discussion? All right, can we get a reminder what we're voting on again?
The motion is to retain the ordinance and recommend the council adopt the amendments proposed in the draft.
Okay. Roll call.
Dykeman?
Yes.
Mathested?
Yes.
Olson?
No.
Schuler?
No.
Staley?
Yes.
Zablotny?
No.
Zeltinger?
No.
Blessum?
No.
Burlingame?
Yes.
Motion fails.
All right. What's the next recommendation? Miranda?
I would recommend we approve the revised ordinance. The recommendation we give to council would be to approve the revised ordinance should they deem the committee remain in effect.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
My only, the one I just made, I don't think we're meeting that. If you guys are comfortable bringing that back, I'm willing to work with that. Again, back to some of my very first comments on this days, the words we say matter, and following what we were asked to do matters, following the law matters. This motion specifically is not following what council asked us to do.
Travis?
And I'm going to go back to what Harold stated very clearly. They asked us for a recommendation. Now, whether they're scapegoating or not, I'm fine with that. Put it on our backs. Maybe some of you aren't, but I'm willing to do what they weren't willing to do. That's why I'm here. And we ought to take that with a stripe on our shoulder and our shirt, make that decision. They still are going to be accountable for it. This motion does not accomplish what they asked us to do, which was to push their responsibility off on us. Now, I get that it is complex. I will give them the fact that it's not something that's easily discussed and figured out in a short period sitting at the council podium here. But so I'll give them that. But at the same time, let's not do what they did. Let's be convicted on what it is we want to recommend.
Can I just I have a thought. I'm just wondering, why was this even brought into existence back in the 70s? There must have been a main reason.
So your federal and state laws weren't as robust or defined at that time frame. So local government took action. Since the 70s, there's more federal and state laws on the books, which has facilitated local governments taking less of a role in this. And as I stated in previous meeting, most of these human rights committees, commissions have translated into human relations committees. They've taken a different focus about diversity, equity, inclusion versus a commission that had the power to investigate and instigate penalties with regards to discrimination.
Lisa?
Yeah, thank you. So obviously, we've had two motions that have failed. I don't think that Miranda's motion does necessarily meet the letter of the intent of what was given to us. However, I think it does give the city council the opportunity to be able to voice our opinion, to vote. It gives us that same opportunity to hear back from people now that, there'll be a draft copy out there and people can respond to it. So although it is not exact, I think it's really our only path forward. And while others may think that they're, somehow pushing this back on the city council, I relish the opportunity to get to vote on this one more time, because all along, I just wanted the discussion, and we've had the discussion. We've had good, meaty, beneficial discussion. And now that we've had it, it is the city council's responsibility to vote one last time.
Yeah, and I appreciate that very much, because I actually believe that. I think that the council will take it up and will do its job in this particular case. I think one really important thing is that this portion of the discussion, this last little bit where there was good debate and there's differences of thought, I think that just needs to come across. 2 5-4 votes back to back, where it was literally the two polar opposites, says it's divided. It's not a simple answer, and they really do need to take a stand, and it's the council that will do so.
So Scott, just quickly, Scott isn't even aware of this yet. What I have started to do is draft a report, which of course Scott and I will sit and look at together, but make that report available. And I think that that is very pertinent information that needs to go into the report to the council, that they were very close votes, and there was a lot of good discussion, very close votes. So that will be included.
Miranda?
I just want to acknowledge the only other alderman besides the two sitting up here that I have seen at any of our meetings is Alderman Padragula. And that is another reason why I want this going back to the council. We have, and granted, other aldermen may be watching this and alderwomen may be watching this on YouTube with the majority of, the public. But the reality is we've only had 3 engaged council members at any of these meetings, which is, again, why I want it going back to them. We've got majority of them, we haven't even seen them at any of these.
And I will just say that as we obviously have not yet agreed on a suggestion, and in all reality, we might not be able to agree on a suggestion exactly as was laid out in the memo forming this committee. I don't think that's bad. I have 2 different quotes kind of screaming in my head right now. They're both British quotes. So again, it's 8:12 and I haven't had dinner yet either, Denise. So maybe I'm delirious and thinking in British here. But one is consensus. It's a Margaret Thatcher quote. I'm probably going to butcher a little bit. Basically, consensus is the process of breaking an issue down to a point where none of us really like it and none of us can agree to it, but at least it's moving forward. And that's kind of how I feel about the motion that's on the table. And the second is, from Winston Churchill, which is democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. And that's kind of what's happening here, is that we're sitting down, we're having these debates, we're having this discussion. We're going to push forward a recommendation with all of the data that's went in and all this work that's went in from everybody in this committee. And then there's going to be a elected body that's going to make another recommendation or a vote, or maybe kick it down. I don't know what's going to happen because there's only 3 of us here tonight. But that's the way that this process is supposed to work. And I actually don't mind if it takes a long time, because I think that decision-making should take a long time. And that's part of the natural kind of conservativeness of government, which is things shouldn't be just quick decisions all the time. So that's where I'm at with this vote right now. Is I'm not in love with it. I don't hate it. I'm willing to do it. And I'm willing to take that voice of what you all have done and the hard work that's been done on this committee forward to the council and allow them to make decisions from that point, and allow us to make decisions at that point. Miranda?
One more follow-up. I think that we all should, even though our work will be done essentially when this meeting is over, hopefully, I think we all need to slot in the potential 2 meetings that this is brought before the council so we can give our personal opinions on where we want this to go.
Which is what I want to piggyback off that. If the city council was to take our recommendation, just to look at the red line document and read it over, will they have the opportunity to invite the public in to talk to them and find out where they're? See, I feel like that's the point, what we need to get to, because like I said before, I didn't know anything that happened back in June. I was not aware what happened before I got into this committee. And I would like to hear a full group of the public coming out when they're welcome. And then we can understand the impact of what we actually did, because there's things we probably haven't even heard. And I think that really, lends the value to the whole entirety of the community. I definitely want to follow and go with Miranda's recommendation. I will vote for yes.
Further discussion? All right, call the roll.
Schuler,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Zablotny,
No.
Zeltinger,
No.
Blessam,
No.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Stegman,
Yes.
Matheson,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, any other motions?
Mr. Chairman, do you need a motion for which date, or you guys take care of that anyway?
I think we.
I did put an item up there, when you guys moved this from the 30th, which it was originally, but because you had gotten your work completed, moved it to the 28th due to other public meetings. It did place the option that it could be on the December 4th meeting for first reading, where it would be an action item. That doesn't give staff a lot of time, nor does it give the chair people a lot of time to, kind of come up with Alderman Olson having a report and things like that. So if you were to wait till the 18th, it would be the December 18th meeting with a second reading. If it were to have an ordinance, it would need a second reading the first meeting in January.
I like that plan better, of just giving us a minute to breathe and people, the public to look it over, other council members to get it. I mean, we can still get the information to them, but it just gives us a little bit more time to breathe.
So my only question on that, and it's for the city attorney, what does that do to the moratorium? Or in that same December 18th meeting, can we extend the moratorium 2 weeks? Or what happens there?
So it could be extended if that's something we need to revisit. So the exact language is on your screens, I believe, yes. The moratorium shall remain in effect until December 31st, so through the end of December, or until the city council repeals or amends this division, whichever occurs first. So if at that December 18th meeting, they decide they want to repeal it or amend it, they could take action on that day. And then if they do decide they want to amend it, there's going to have to be a second reading of that ordinance that's going to take it into December. So the moratorium will no longer be in effect. But the chances of the mayor going rogue and seating a committee under the old ordinance is probably incredibly slim. So I don't know that you would have to jump through the door sideways to extend the moratorium. Now, if it seems like there's going to be significant discussion at the council level where they're going to extend it further, we may want to revisit that. But like I said, I don't know that the mayor is going to seat a committee with this discussion that's happening.
And technically, he would need our authority to even appoint that, so.
Yes, it would have, yes.
I don't think this
Chances of
is the
any of that
opportunity for
happening
Tom
would
Ross
be
to go
really
rogue.
slim. Yeah, we don't have a committee right now. And so they wouldn't be taking action under the current ordinance. If the current ordinance springs back to life, it's not as though there's a body ready to go and start making decisions, hearing grievances. Even if someone should file a grievance under that ordinance, we would still have to go through the actions to seat the committee. We could revisit imposing the moratorium. And I feel like for as much time as we've invested in this, the chances are probably good the council will resolve this in the next few meetings.
Just for clarification, though, the repeal would also need a second reading in January, correct?
Yes, to strike the ordinance, yes. Any amendment to the Code of Ordinances will require 2 readings, so 2 meetings.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you, guys.